Welcome to Voice of the Pages, the Decameron of Giovanni Boccaccio. Here beginneth the book called Decameron and surnamed Prince Galahalt, wherein are contained 100 stories in 10 days told by 7 ladies and 3 young men. Proem. A kindly thing it is to have compassion of the afflicted, and albeit it well beseemeth every one, yet of those is it more particularly required who have erst had need of comfort, and have found it in any, amongst whom, if ever any had need thereof, or held it dear, or took pleasure therein aforetimes, certes, I am one of these. For that, having from my first youth unto this present been beyond measure inflamed with a very high and noble passion, higher and nobler, perchance, than might appear, were I to relate it, to sort with my low estate. Albeit by persons of discretion who had intelligence thereof I was commended therefore, and accounted so much the more worth, nathless a passing sore travail it was to me to bear it, not, certes, by reason of the cruelty of the beloved lady, but because of the exceeding ardor, begotten in my breast of an ill-ordered appetite, for which, for that it suffered me not to stand content at any reasonable bounds, caused me oft times feel more chagrin than I had occasion for. In this my affliction the pleasant discourse of a certain friend of mine, and his admirable consolations afforded me such refreshment that I firmly believe of these it came that I died not. But as it pleased him who, being himself infinite, hath for a mutable law appointed unto all things mundane that they shall have an end, my love, beyond every other fervent, and which nor stress of reasoning nor counsel, no, nor yet manifest shame nor peril that might ensue thereof, had availed either to break or to bend, of its own motion, in process of time, on such wise abetted that of itself at this present it hath left me only that pleasance which it is used to afford unto whoso adventureth himself not too far in the navigation of its profounder oceans, by reason whereof, all chagrin being done away, I feel it grown delightsome, whereas it used to be grievous. Yet, albeit the pain hath ceased, not, therefore, is the memory fled of the benefits whilom received and the kindnesses bestowed on me by those to whom, of the goodwill they bore me, my troubles were grievous, nor, as I deem, will it ever pass away, save for death. And for that gratitude, to my thinking, is, among the other virtues, especially commendable and its contrary blameworthy, I have, that I may not appear ungrateful, bethought myself, now that I can call myself free, to endeavor, in that little which is possible to me, to afford some relief, in requital of that which I received aforetime, if not to those who succored me and who, belike, by reason of their good sense or of their fortune, have no occasion therefor, to those, at least, who stand in need thereof. And albeit my support, or rather I should say my comfort, may be and indeed is of little enough avail to the afflicted, nathless meseemeth it should rather be proffered whereas the need appeareth greater, as well because it will there do more service, as for that it will still be there the liefer had. And who will deny that this comfort, whatsoever worth it be, it behoveth much more to give unto lovesick ladies than unto men? For that these within their tender bosoms, fearful and shamefast, hold hid the fires of love, which those who have proved know how much more puissance they have than those which are manifest, and constrained by the wishes, the pleasures, the commandments of fathers, mothers, brothers and husbands, abide most time immured in the narrow compass of their chambers, and sitting in a manner idle, willing and willing not in one breath, revolve in themselves various thoughts which it is not possible should still be merry. By reason whereof, if there arise in their minds any melancholy, bred of ardent desire, needs must it with grievous annoy abide therein, except it be done away by new discourse, more by token that they are far less strong than men to endure. With men in love it happeneth not on this wise, as we may manifestly see. They, if any melancholy or heaviness of thought oppress them, have many means of easing it or doing it away, for that to them, and they have a mind thereto, there lacketh not commodity of going about hearing and seeing many things, fowling, hunting, fishing, riding, gaming and trafficking, each of which means hath, altogether or in part, power to draw the mind unto itself, and to divert it from troublous thought, at least for some space of time, whereafter, one way or another, either solacement superveneth, or else the annoy groweth less. Wherefore, to the end that the unright of fortune may by me in part be amended, which, where there is the less strength to endure, as we see it in delicate ladies, hath there been the more niggard of support, I purpose, for the succour and solace of ladies in love. Unto others the needle and the spindle and the reel suffice, to recount 100 stories or fables or parables or histories, or whatever you like to style them, in 10 days' time related by an honourable company of 7 ladies and 3 young men made in the days of the late deadly pestilence, together with sundry canzonets sung by the aforesaid ladies for their diversion. In these stories will be found love chances, both gladsome and grievous, and other accidents of fortune befallen as well in times present as in days of old, whereof the ladies aforesaid, who shall read them, may at once take solace from the delectable things therein shown forth and useful counsel, inasmuch as they may learn thereby what is to be eschewed and what is on like wise to be ensued, the which methinketh cannot be tied without cease of chagrin. If it happen thus, as God grant it may, let them render thanks therefore to love, who, by loosing me from his bonds, hath vouchsafed me the power of applying myself to the service of their pleasures. Day the 1st. Here beginneth the first day of the Decameron, wherein, after demonstration made by the author of the manner in which it came to pass that the persons who are hereinafter presented foregathered for the purpose of devising together, under the governance of Pampinia, is discoursed of that which is most agreeable unto each. As often, most gracious ladies, as, taking thought in myself, I mind me how very pitiful you are all by nature, so often do I recognize that this present work will, to your thinking, have a grievous and a weariful beginning, inasmuch as the dolorous remembrance of the late pestiferous mortality, which it beareth on its forefront, is universally irksome to all who saw or otherwise knew it. But I would not therefore have this affright you from reading further, as if in the reading you were still to fare among sighs and tears. Let this grisly beginning be none other to you than is to wayfarers a rugged and steep mountain, beyond which is situate a most fair and delightful plain, which latter cometh so much the pleasanter to them as the greater was the hardship of the ascent and the descent. For, like as dolour occupieth the extreme of gladness, even so are miseries determined by imminent joyance. This brief annoy, I say brief, inasmuch as it is contained in few pages, is straightway succeeded by the pleasance and delight which I have already promised you, and which, belike, were it not aforesaid, might not be looked for from such a beginning. And in truth, could I fairly have availed to bring you to my desire otherwise than by so rugged a path as this will be, I had gladly done it, but being in a manner constrained thereto, for that, without this reminiscence of our past miseries, it might not be shown what was the occasion of the coming about of the things that will hereafter be read, I have brought myself to write them. I say, then, that the years of the era of the fruitful incarnation of the Son of God had attained to the number of 1,348, when into the notable city of Florence, fair over every other of Italy, there came the death-dealing pestilence, which, through the operation of the heavenly bodies or of our own iniquitous dealings, being sent down upon mankind for our correction by the just wrath of God, had some years before appeared in the parts of the East End. After having bereft these latter of an innumerable number of inhabitants, extending without cease from one place to another, had now unhappily spread towards the west, and there against no wisdom availing nor human foresight, whereby the city was purged of many impurities by officers deputed to that end, and it was forbidden unto any sick person to enter therein, and many were the counsels given for the preservation of health, nor yet humble supplications, not once but many times both in ordered processions and on other wise made unto God by devout persons, about the coming in of the spring of the aforesaid year, it began on horrible and miraculous wise to show forth its dolorous effects. Yet not as it had done in the East, where, if any bled at the nose, it was a manifest sign of inevitable death. Nay, but in men and women alike there appeared, at the beginning of the malady, certain swellings, either on the groin or under the armpits, whereof some waxed of the bigness of a common apple, others like unto an egg, some more and some less, and these the vulgar named plague boils. From these two parts the aforesaid death-bearing plague boils proceeded, in brief space, to appear and come indifferently in every part of the body, wherefrom, after a while, the fashion of the contagion began to change into black or livid blotches, which showed themselves in many first on the arms and about the thighs, and after spread to every other part of the person, in some large and sparse, and in others small and thick sown, and like as the plague boils had been first, and yet were a very certain token of coming death, even so were these for every one to whom they came. To the cure of these maladies nor counsel of physician nor virtue of any medicine appeared to avail or profit aught. On the contrary, whether it was that the nature of the infection suffered it not, or that the ignorance of the physicians, of whom, over and above the men of art, the number, both men and women, who had never had any teaching of medicine, was become exceeding great, availed not to know whence it arose, and consequently took not due measures thereagainst, not only did few recover thereof, but well nigh all died within the third day from the appearance of the aforesaid signs, this sooner and that later, and for the most part without fever or other accident. And this pestilence was the more virulent for that, by communication with those who were sick thereof, it gat hold upon the sound, no otherwise than fire upon things dry or greasy, whenas they are brought very near thereunto. Nay, the mischief was yet greater, for that not only did converse and consort high on with the sick give to the sound infection of cause of common death, but the mere touching of the clothes or of whatsoever other thing had been touched or used of the sick appeared of itself to communicate the malady to the toucher. A marvelous thing to hear is that which I have to tell, and one which, had it not been seen of many men's eyes and of mine own, I had scarce dared credit, much less set down in writing, though I had heard it from one worthy of belief. I say, then, that of such efficience was the nature of the pestilence in question in communicating itself from one to another, that not only did it pass from man to man, but this, which is much more it many times visibly did, to wit, a thing which had pertained to a man sick or dead of the aforesaid sickness, being touched by an animal foreign to the human species, not only infected this latter with the plague, but in a very brief space of time killed it. Of this mine own eyes, as hath a little before been said, had one day, among others, experience on this wise, to wit, that the rags of a poor man, who had died of the plague, being cast out into the public way, 2 hogs came up to them, and having first, after their wont, rooted amain among them with their snouts, took them in their mouths, and tossed them about their jaws, then, in a little while, after turning round and round, they both, as if they had taken poison, fell down dead upon the rags, with which they had in an ill hour intermeddled. From these things and many others like unto them, or yet stranger divers fears and conceits were begotten in those who abode alive, which well nigh all tended to a very barbarous conclusion, namely, to shun and flee from the sick and all that pertained to them, and thus doing, each thought to secure immunity for himself. Some there were who conceived that to live moderately and keep oneself from all excess was the best defense against such a danger, wherefore, making up their company, they lived removed from every other and shut themselves up in those houses where none had been sick and where living was best, and there, using very temperately of the most delicate viands and the finest wines, and eschewing all incontinence, they abode with music and such other diversions as they might have, never suffering themselves to speak with any nor choosing to hear any news from without of death or sick folk. Others, inclining to the contrary opinion, maintain that to carouse and make merry and go about singing and frolicking and satisfy the appetite in everything possible and laugh and scoff at whatsoever befell was a very certain remedy for such an ill. That which they said they put in practice as best they might, going about day and night, now to this tavern, now to that, drinking without stint or measure, and on this wise they did yet more freely in other folks' houses, so but they scented there aught that liked or tempted them, as they might lightly do, for that every one, as he were to live no longer, had abandoned all care of his possessions, as of himself, wherefore the most part of the houses were become common good and strangers used them, when as they happened upon them, like as the very owner might have done, and with all this bestial preoccupation, they still shun the sick to the best of their power. In this sore affliction and misery of our city, the reverend authority of the laws, both human and divine, was all in a manner dissolved and fallen into decay, for lack of the ministers and executors thereof, who, like other men, were all either dead or sick, or else left so destitute of followers that they were unable to exercise any office, wherefore every one had license to do whatsoever pleased him. Many others held a middle course between the two aforesaid, not straightening themselves so exactly in the matter of diet as the first, neither allowing themselves such license in drinking and other debauchery as the second, but using things in sufficiency, according to their appetites. Nor did they seclude themselves, but went about, carrying in their hands some flowers, some odoriferous herbs, and other some divers kinds of spiceries, which they set oft into their noses, accounting it an excellent thing to fortify the brain with such odors, more by token that the air seemed all heavy and attainted with the stench of the dead bodies, and that of the sick, and of the remedies used. Some were of a more barbarous, though, peradventure, a surer way of thinking, avouching that there was no remedy against pestilences better than no, nor any so good as to flee before them, wherefore, moved by this reasoning and recking of naught but themselves, very many, both men and women, abandoned their own city, their own houses and homes, their kinsfolk and possessions, and sought the country seats of others, or, at the least, their own, as if the wrath of God, being moved to punish the iniquity of mankind, would not proceed to do so wheresoever they might be, but would content itself with afflicting those only who were found within the walls of their city. Or as if they were persuaded that no person was to remain therein, and that its last hour was come. And albeit these, who opined thus variously, died not all, yet neither did they all escape, nay, many of each way of thinking, and in every place sickened of the plague, and languished on all sides, well nigh abandoned, having themselves, what while they were whole, set the example to those who abode in health. Indeed, leaving be that townsman avoided townsman, and that well nigh no neighbor took thought unto other, and that kinsfolk seldom or never visited one another, and held no converse together save from afar. This tribulation had stricken such terror to the hearts of all, men and women alike, that brother forsook brother, uncle nephew, and sister brother, and oftentimes wife husband. Nay, what is yet more extraordinary and well nigh incredible, fathers and mothers refused to visit or tend their very children as they had not been theirs. By reason whereof there remained unto those, and the number of them, both males and females, was incalculable, who fell sick, none other succor than that which they owed either to the charity of friends, and of these there were few, or the greed of servants, who tended them, allured by high and extravagant wage, albeit, for all this, these latter were not grown many, and those men and women of mean understanding, and for the most part in use to such offices, who served for well nigh naught but to reach things called for by the sick, or to note when they died, and in the doing of these services many of them perished with their gain. Of this abandonment of the sick by neighbors, kinsfolk, and friends, and of the scarcity of servants arose an usage, before well nigh unheard, to wit, that no woman, how fair or lovesome or well-born soever she might be, once fallen sick, recked aught of having a man to tend her, whatever he might be, or young or old, and without any shame discovered to him every part of her body, no otherwise than she would have done to a woman, so but the necessity of her sickness required it, the which belike, in those who recovered, was the occasion of lesser modesty in time to come. Moreover, there ensued of this abandonment the death of many who peradventure, had they been succored, would have escaped alive, wherefore, as well for the lack of the opportune services which the sick availed not to have as for the virulence of the plague. Such was the multitude of those who died in the city by day and by night that it was an astonishment to hear tell thereof, much more to see it, and thence, as it were of necessity, there sprang up among those who abode alive things contrary to the pristine manners of the townsfolk. It was then, even as we yet see it used, a custom that the kinswomen and she-neighbors of the dead should assemble in his house, and there condole with those who more nearly pertained unto him, whilst his neighbors and many other citizens foregathered with his next of kin before his house, whither, according to the dead man's quality, came the clergy. And he with funeral pomp of chants and candles was borne on the shoulders of his peers to the church chosen by himself before his death, which usages, after the virulence of the plague began to increase, were either altogether or for the most part laid aside, and other and strange customs sprang up in their stead. For that not only did folk die without having a multitude of women about them, but many there were who departed this life without witness, and few indeed were they to whom the pious plaints and bitter tears of their kinsfolk were vouchsafed. Nay, in lieu of these things there obtained, for the most part, laughter and jests and jibes and feasting and merry-making in company, which usance women, laying aside womanly pitifulness, had right well learned for their own safety. Few, again, were they whose bodies were accompanied to the church by more than half a score or a dozen of their neighbors, and of these no worshipful and illustrious citizens, but a sort of bloodsuckers, sprung from the dregs of the people, who styled themselves pickmen and did such offices for hire, shouldered the bier and bore it with hurried steps, not to that church which the dead man had chosen before his death, but most times to the nearest, behind 5 or 6 priests, with little light, and whiles none at all, which latter, with the aid of the said pickmen, thrust him into what grave soever they first found unoccupied, without troubling themselves with too long or too formal a service. The condition of the common people, and belike in great part of the middle class also, was yet more pitiable to behold, for that these, for the most part retained by hope or poverty in their houses and abiding in their own quarters, sickened by the 1,000 daily, and being altogether untended and unsuccoured, died well nigh all without recourse. Many breathed their last in the open street, whilst other many, for all they died in their houses, made it known to the neighbors that they were dead rather by the stench of their rotting bodies than otherwise, and of these and others who died all about the whole city was full. For the most part one same usance was observed by the neighbors, moved more by fear lest the corruption of the dead bodies should imperil themselves than by any charity they had for the departed, to wit, that either with their own hands or with the aid of certain bearers, when as they might have any, they brought the bodies of those who had died forth of their houses and laid them before their doors, where, especially in the morning, those who went about might see corpses without number. Then they fetched biers, and some, in default thereof, they laid upon some board or other. Nor was it only one bier that carried 2 or 3 corpses, nor did this happen but once. Nay, many might have been counted which contained husband and wife, 2 or 3 brothers, father and son, or the like. And an infinite number of times it befell that, 2 priests going with 1 cross for someone, 3 or 4 biers, borne by bearers, ranged themselves behind the latter, and whereas the priests thought to have but 1 dead man to bury, they had 6 or 8, and whiles more. Nor therefore were the dead honored with aught of tears or candles or funeral train. Nay, the thing was come to such a pass that folk recked no more of men that died than nowadays they would of goats, whereby it very manifestly appeared that which the natural course of things had not availed, by dint of small and infrequent harms, to teach the wise to endure with patience, the very greatness of their ills had brought even the simple to expect and make no account of. The consecrated ground sufficing not to the burial of the vast multitude of corpses aforesaid, which daily and well nigh hourly came carried in crowds to every church, especially if it were sought to give each his own place, according to ancient usance. There were made throughout the churchyards, after every other part was full, vast trenches, wherein those who came after were laid by the 100, and being heaped up therein by layers, as goods are stowed aboard ship, were covered with a little earth, till such time as they reached the top of the trench. Moreover, not to go longer searching out and recalling every particular of our past miseries, as they befell throughout the city, I say that, whilst so sinister a time prevailed in the latter, on no wise therefore was the surrounding country spared, wherein, letting be the castles, which in their littleness were like unto the city, throughout the scattered villages and in the fields, the poor and miserable husbandmen and their families, without succor of physician or aid of servitor, died, not like men, but well nigh like beasts, by the ways or in their tillages or about the houses, indifferently by day and night. By reason whereof, growing lax like the townsfolk in their manners and customs, they recked not of any thing or business of theirs, nay, all, as if they looked for death that very day, studied with all their wit, not to help to maturity the future produce of their cattle and their fields and the fruits of their own past toils, but to consume those which were ready to hand. Thus it came to pass that the oxen, the asses, the sheep, the goats, the swine, the fowls, nay, the very dogs, so faithful to mankind, being driven forth of their own houses, went straying at their pleasure about the fields, where the very corn was abandoned, without being cut, much less gathered in, and many, well nigh like reasonable creatures, after grazing all day, returned at night, glutted, to their houses, without the constraint of any herdsman. To leave the country and return to the city, what more can be said save that such and so great was the cruelty of heaven, and in part, peradventure, that of men, that, between March and the following July, what with the virulence of that pestiferous sickness, and the number of sick folk, ill-tended or forsaken in their need, through the fearfulness of those who were whole, it is believed for certain that upward of 100,000 human beings perished within the walls of the city of Florence, which, peradventure, before the advent of that death-dealing calamity, had not been accounted to hold so many. Alas, how many great palaces, how many goodly houses, how many noble mansions, once full of families, of lords and of ladies, abode empty even to the meanest servant. How many memorable families, how many ample heritages, how many famous fortunes were seen to remain without lawful heir. How many valiant men, how many fair ladies, how many sprightly youths, whom, not others only, but Galen, Hippocrates, or Aesculapius themselves would have judged most hale, breakfasted in the morning with their kinsfolk, comrades and friends, and that same night supped with their ancestors in the other world. I am myself weary of going wandering so long among such miseries, wherefore, purposing henceforth to leave such part thereof as I can fitly, I say that, our city being at this pass, well nigh void of inhabitants, it chanced, as I afterward heard from a person worthy of credit, that there foregathered in the venerable church of Santa Maria Novella, one Tuesday morning when there was well nigh none else there, 7 young ladies, all knit one to another by friendship or neighborhood or kinship, who had heard divine service in mourning attire, assorted with such a season. Not one of them had passed her 28th year, nor was less than 18 years old, and each was discreet and of noble blood, fair of favor and well-mannered and full of honest sprightliness. The names of these ladies I would in proper terms set out, did not just cause forbid me, to wit, that I would not have it possible that, in time to come, any of them should take shame by reason of the things hereinafter related as being told or hearkened by them, the laws of disport being nowadays somewhat straitened, which at that time, for the reasons above shown, were of the largest, not only for persons of their years, but for those of a much riper age, nor yet would I give occasion to the envious, who are still ready to carp at every praiseworthy life, on any wise to disparage the fair fame of these honorable ladies with unseemly talk. Wherefore, so that which each saith may hereafterward be apprehended without confusion, I purpose to denominate them by names altogether, or in part sorting with each one's quality. The first of them, and her of ripest age, I shall call Pampinia, the second Fiammetta, the third Philomena, and the fourth Emilia. To the fifth we will give the name of Loretta, to the sixth that of Neophile, and the last, not without cause, we will style Elisa. These, then, not drawn of any set purpose, but foregathering by chance in a corner of the church, having seated themselves in a ring, after divers size, Let be the saying of paternosters, and fell to devising with one another many and various things of the nature of the time. After a while, the others being silent, Pampinea proceeded to speak thus. Dear my ladies, you may, like myself, have many times heard that whoso honestly useth his right doth no one wrong, and it is the natural right of every one who is born here below to succor, keep and defend his own life as best he may. And in so far is this allowed that it hath happened whiles that, for the preservation thereof, men have been slain without any fault. If this much be conceded of the laws, which have in view the well-being of all mortals, how much more is it lawful for us, and whatsoever other, without offence unto any, to take such means as we may for the preservation of our lives? As often as I consider our fashions of this morning, and those of many other mornings past, and bethink me what manner discourses are ours, I feel, and you likewise must feel, that each of us is in fear for herself. Nor do I anywise wonder at this, but I wonder exceedingly, considering that we all have a woman's wit, that we take no steps to provide ourselves against that which each of us justly feareth. We abide here, to my seeming no otherwise than as if we would or should be witness of how many dead bodies are brought hither for burial, or to hearken if the friars of the place, whose number is come well nigh to naught, chant their offices at the due hours, or by our apparel to show forth unto whosoever appeareth here the nature and extent of our distresses. If we depart hence, we either see dead bodies or sick persons carried about, or those whom for their misdeeds the authority of the public laws whilera condemned to exile, overrun the whole place with unseemly excesses, as if scoffing at the laws, for that they know the executors thereof to be either dead or sick, whilst the dregs of our city, fattened with our blood, style themselves pickmen and ruffle it everywhere in mockery of us, riding and running all about and flouting us with our distresses in ribald songs. We hear nothing here but such an one is dead, or such an one is at the point of death, and were there any to make them, we should hear dolorous lamentations on all sides. And if we return to our houses, I know not if it is with you as with me, but, for my part, when I find none left therein of a great household, save my serving maid, I wax fearful and feel every hair of my body stand on end. And wherever I go or abide about the house, meseemeth I see the shades of those who are departed, and who wear not those countenances that I was used to see, but terrify me with a horrid aspect, I know not whence newly come to them. By reason of these things I feel myself alike ill at ease here and abroad and at home, more by token that meseemeth none, who hath, as we have, the power and whither to go, is left here, other than ourselves, or if any such there be. I have many a time both heard and perceived that, without making any distinction between things lawful and unlawful, so but appetite move them, whether alone or in company, both day and night, they do that which affordeth them most delight. Nor is it the laity alone who do thus, nay, even those who are shut in the monasteries, persuading themselves that what befitteth and is lawful to others alike sortable and unforbidden unto them, have broken the laws of obedience, and giving themselves to carnal delights, thinking thus to escape, are grown lewd and dissolute. If thus, then, it be, as is manifestly to be seen, what do we hear? What look we for? What dream we? Why are we more sluggish and slower to provide for our safety than all the rest of the townsfolk? Deem we ourselves of less price than others, or do we hold our life to be bounden in our bodies with a stronger chain than is theirs, and that therefore we need reck nothing of aught that hath power to harm it? We are deceived. What folly is ours if we think thus? As often as we choose to call to mind the number and quality of the youths and ladies overborne of this cruel pestilence, we may see a most manifest proof thereof. Wherefore, in order that we may not, through wilfulness or nonchalance, fall into that wherefrom we may, peradventure, and we but will, by some means or other escape, I know not if it seem to you as it doth to me, but methinketh it were excellently well done that we, such as we are, depart the city, as many have done before us, and eschewing, as we would death, the dishonorable example of others, betake ourselves quietly to our places in the country, whereof each of us hath great plenty, and, There take such diversion, such delight, and such pleasance as we may, without anywise overpassing the bounds of reason. There may we hear the small birds sing, there may we see the hills and plains clad all in green, and the fields full of corn wave even as doth the sea. There may we see trees, 1,000 sorts, and there is the face of heaven more open to view, the which, angered against us though it be, nevertheless donneth not unto us its eternal beauties, far goodlier to look upon than the empty walls of our city. Moreover, there is the air far fresher, and there at this season is more plenty of that which behoveth unto life, and less is the sum of a noise, for that, albeit the husbandmen die there, even as do the townsfolk here, the displeasance is there the less, insomuch as houses and inhabitants are rarer than in the city. Here, on the other hand, if I deem aright, we abandon no one, nay, we may far rather say with truth that we ourselves are abandoned, seeing that our kinsfolk, either dying or fleeing from death, have left us alone in this great tribulation, as it were we pertained not unto them. No blame can therefore befall the ensuing of this council, nay, dolour and chagrin and belike death may betide us, and we ensue it not. Wherefore, an it please you, methinketh we should do well to take our maids and letting follow after us with the necessary gear, sojourn today in this place and tomorrow in that, taking such pleasance and diversion as the season may afford, and on this wise abide till such time, and we be not earlier overtaken of death, as we shall see what issue heaven reserveth unto these things. And I would remind you that it is no more forbidden unto us honorably to depart than it is unto many others of our sex to abide in dishonour. The other ladies, having hearkened to Pampinia, not only commended her counsel, but, eager to follow it, had already begun to devise more particularly among themselves of the manner, as if, arising from their session there, they were to set off out of hand. But Philomena, who was exceeding discreet, said, Ladies, albeit that which Pampinia allegeth is excellently well said, yet is there no occasion for running, as meseemeth you would do. Remember that we are all women, and none of us is child enough not to know how little reasonable women are among themselves, and how ill, without some man's guidance, they know how to order themselves. We are fickle, wilful, suspicious, faint-hearted, and timorous, for which reasons I misdoubt me sore, and we take not some other guidance than our own, that our company will be far too soon dissolved, and with less honour to ourselves than were seemly. Wherefore we should do well to provide ourselves, ere we begin. Verily, answered Elisa, men are the head of women, and without their wardnance seldom cometh any emprise of ours to good end. But how may we come by these men? There is none of us but knoweth that of her kinsmen the most part are dead, and those who abide alive are all gone fleeing that which we seek to flee, in diverse companies, some here and some there, without our knowing where, and to invite strangers would not be seemly. Seeing that, if we would endeavour after our welfare, it behoveth us find a means of so ordering ourselves that, wherever we go for diversion and repose, scandal nor annoy may ensue thereof. Whilst such discourse was toward between the ladies, behold, there entered the church 3 young men, yet not so young that the age of the youngest of them was less than 25 years, in whom neither the perversity of the time nor loss of friends and kinsfolk, no, nor fear for themselves had availed to cool, much less to quench, the fire of love. Of these one was called Pamphilo, another Philostrato, and the third Dionio, all very agreeable and well-bred, and they went seeking, for their supreme solace, in such a perturbation of things, to see their mistresses, who, as it chanced, were all 3 among the 7 aforesaid, whilst certain of the other ladies were near kinswomen of one or other of the young men. No sooner had their eyes fallen on the ladies than they were themselves espied of them, whereupon quoth Pampinia, smiling, See, fortune is favourable to our beginnings, and hath thrown in our way young men of worth and discretion, who will gladly be to us both guides and servitors, and we disdain not to accept of them in that capacity. But Neophile, whose face was grown all vermel for shamefastness, for that it was she who was beloved of one of the young men, said, For God's sake, Pampinia, look what thou sayest. I acknowledge most frankly that there can be naught but all good said of which one soever of them, and I hold them sufficient unto a much greater thing than this, even as I opine that they would bear, not only ourselves, but far fairer and nobler dames than we, good and honourable company. But, for that it is a very manifest thing that they are enamoured of certain of us who are here, I fear lest, without our fault or theirs, scandal and blame ensue thereof, if we carry them with us. Quoth Philomela, that skilleth not, so, but I live honestly and conscience prick me not of aught. Let who will speak to the contrary, God and the truth will take up arms for me. Wherefore, if they be disposed to come, verily we may say with Pampinea that fortune is favourable to our going. The other ladies, hearing her speak thus absolutely, not only held their peace, but all with one accord agreed that the young men should be called and acquainted with their project and bidden to be pleased bear them company in their expedition. Accordingly, without more words, Pampinea, who was knit by kinship to one of them, rising to her feet, made for the three young men, who stood fast, looking upon them, and saluting them with a cheerful countenance, discovered to them their intent, and prayed them, on behalf of herself and her companions, that they would be pleased to bear them company in a pure and brotherly spirit. The young men at the first thought themselves bantered, but, seeing that the lady spoke in good earnest, they made answer joyfully that they were ready, and without losing time about the matter, forthright took order for that which they had to do against departure. On the following morning, Wednesday to wit, towards break of day, having let orderly make ready all things needful and dispatch them in advance whereas they purposed to go, the ladies, with certain of their waiting women, and the three young men, with as many of their serving men, departing Florence, set out upon their way, nor had they gone more than 2 short miles from the city, when they came to the place foreappointed of them, which was situate on a little hill, somewhat withdrawn on every side from the highway, and full of various shrubs and plants, all green of leafage and pleasant to behold. On the summit of this hill was a palace, with a goodly and great courtyard in its midst, and galleries and saloons and bedchambers, each in itself most fair and adorned and notable with jocund paintings, with lawns and grass plots round about, and wonder goodly gardens and wells of very cold water, and cellars full of wines of price, things more apt unto curious drinkers than unto sober and modest ladies. The newcomers, to their no little pleasure, found the place all swept, and the beds made in the chambers, and everything full of such flowers as might be had at that season, and strewn with rushes. As soon as they had seated themselves, Dioneo, who was the merriest springled in the world and full of quips and cranks, said, Ladies, your wit, rather than our foresight, hath guided us hither, and I know not what you purpose to do with your cares. As for my own, I left them within the city gates, when as I issued thence with you a while agone. Wherefore, do you either address yourselves to make merry and laugh and sing together with me, in so far, I mean, as pertaineth to your dignity, or give me leave to go back for my cares and abide in the afflicted city. Whereto Pampinea, no otherwise than as if in like manner she had banished all her own cares, answered blithely, Dioneo, thou say'st well, it behoveth us live merrily, nor hath any other occasion caused us flee from yonder miseries. But for that things which are without measure may not long endure, I, who began the discourse wherethrough this so goodly company came to be made, taking thought for the continuance of our gladness, hold it of necessity that we appoint someone to be principal among us, whom we may honor and obey as chief, and whose especial care it shall be to dispose us to live joyously. And in order that each in turn may prove the burden of solicitude, together with the pleasure of headship, and that, the chief being thus drawn, in turn, from one and the other sex, there may be no cause for jealousy, as might happen, were any excluded from the sovereignty, I say that unto each be attributed the burden and the honor for one day. Let who is to be our first chief be at the election of us all. For who shall follow, be it he or she whom it shall please the governor of the day to appoint, when as the hour of vespers draweth near, and let each in turn, at his or her discretion, order and dispose of the place and manner wherein we are to live, for such time as his or her seigneury shall endure. Pampinia's words pleased mightily, and with one voice they elected her chief of the first day, whereupon Philomela, running nimbly to a laurel tree, for that she had many a time heard speak of the honor due to the leaves of this plant, and how worshipworth they made whoso was deservedly crowned withal, and plucking divers sprays therefrom, made her thereof a goodly and honorable wreath, which, being set upon her head, was thenceforth, what while their company lasted, a manifest sign unto every other of the royal office and seigneury. Pampinia, being made queen, commanded that every one should be silent. Then, calling the serving men of the 3 young gentlemen and her own and the other ladies' women, who were 4 in number, before herself, and all being silent, she spoke thus: "In order that I may set you a first example, by which, proceeding from good to better, our company may live and last in order and pleasance, and without reproach so long as it is agreeable to us, I constitute, firstly, Permino, Dionio's servant, my seneschal, and commit unto him the care and ordinance of all our household, and especially that which pertaineth to the service of the saloon. Cerisco, Pamphilo's servant, shall be our purveyor and treasurer, and ensue the commandments of Permino. Tindaro shall look to the service of Philostrato and the other 2 gentlemen in their bedchambers, what time the others, being occupied about their respective offices, cannot attend thereto. Nigia, my woman, and Philomena's Lysiska shall still abide in the kitchen, and there diligently prepare such viands as shall be appointed them of Permino. Loretta's Chimera and Phiometta's Stratilia it is our pleasure shall occupy themselves with the ordinance of the ladies' chambers and the cleanliness of the places where we shall abide, and we will and command all and several as they hold our favor dear, to have a care that, whithersoever they go or whensoever they return and whatsoever they hear or see, they bring us from without no news other than joyous." These orders summarily given and commended of all, Pampinia, rising blithely to her feet, said, "Here be gardens, here be meadows, here be store of other delectable places, wherein let each go a-pleasuring at will, and when tierce soundeth, let all be here, so we may eat in the cool." The merry company, being thus dismissed by the new queen, went straying with slow steps, young men and fair ladies together, about a garden, devising blithely and diverting themselves with weaving goodly garlands of various leaves and carolling amorously. After they had abid end there such time as had been appointed them of the queen, they returned to the house, where they found that Permino had made a diligent beginning with his office, for that, entering a saloon on the ground floor, they saw there the tables laid with the whitest of cloths and beakers that seemed of silver, and everything covered with the flowers of the broom, whereupon, having washed their hands, they all, by command of the queen, seated themselves according to Permino's ordinance. Then came viands delicately dressed, and choicest wines were proffered, and the 3 serving men, without more, quietly tended the tables. All, being gladdened by these things, for that they were fair and orderly done, ate joyously and with store of merry talk, and the tables being cleared away, the queen bade bring instruments of music, for that all the ladies knew how to dance, as also the young men, and some of them could both play and sing excellent well. Accordingly, by her commandment, Dionio took a lute and Fiametta a viol and began softly to sound a dance, whereupon the queen and the other ladies, together with the other 2 young men, having sent the serving men to eat, struck up a round and began with a slow pace to dance a brawl, which ended, they fell to singing quaint and merry ditties. On this wise they abode till it seemed to the queen time to go to sleep, and she accordingly dismissed them all, whereupon the young men retired to their chambers, which were withdrawn from the ladies' lodging, and finding them with the beds well made and as full of flowers as the saloon, put off their clothes and betook themselves to rest, whilst the ladies, on their part, did likewise. None had not long sounded when the queen, arising, made all the other ladies arise, and on like wise the 3 young men, alleging overmuch sleep to be harmful by day, and so they betook themselves to a little meadow, where the grass grew green and high, nor there had the sun power on any side. There, Feeling the waftings of a gentle breeze, they all, as their queen willed it, seated themselves in a ring on the green grass, while she bespoke them thus, As ye see, the sun is high and the heat great, nor is aught heard save the crickets yonder among the olives. Wherefore it were doubtless folly to go anywhither at this present. Here is this sojourn fair and cool, and here, as you see, are chess and tables, and each can divert himself as is most to his mind. But, and my counsel be followed in this, we shall pass away this sultry part of the day, not in gaming, wherein the mind of one of the players must of necessity be troubled, without any great pleasure of the other or of those who look on, but in telling stories, which, one telling, may afford diversion to all the company who hearken, nor shall we have made an end of telling each his story, but the sun will have declined and the heat be abated, and we can then go a-pleasuring whereas it may be most agreeable to us. Wherefore, if this that I say please you, for I am disposed to follow your pleasure therein, let us do it, and if it please you not, let each until the hour of vespers do what most liketh him. Ladies and men alike all approved the story-telling, whereupon, then, said the queen, since this pleaseth you, I will that this first day each be free to tell of such matters as are most to his liking. Then, turning to Pamphilo, who sat on her right hand, she smilingly bade him give beginning to the story-telling with one of his, and he, hearing the commandment, forthright began thus, whilst all gave ear to him. The first story. Master Ciapoletto dupeth a holy friar with a false confession and dieth, and having been in his lifetime the worst of men, he is, after his death, reputed a saint, and called Saint Ciapoletto. It is a seemly thing, dearest ladies, that whatsoever a man doth, he give it beginning from the holy and admirable name of him who is the maker of all things. Wherefore, it behoving me, as the first, to give commencement to our story-telling, I purpose to begin with one of his marvels, to the end that, this being heard, our hope in him, as in a thing immutable, may be confirmed and his name be ever praised of us. It is manifest that, like as things temporal are all transitory and mortal, even so both within and without are they full of annoy and anguish and travail and subject to infinite perils, against which it is indubitable that we, who live mingled therein and who are indeed part and parcel thereof, might avail neither to endure nor to defend ourselves, except God's especial grace lent us strength and foresight, which latter, it is not to be believed, descendeth unto us and upon us by any merit of our own, but of the proper motion of his own benignity and the efficacy of the prayers of those who were mortals even as we are, and, having diligently ensued his commandments, what while they were on life, are now with him become eternal and blessed, and unto whom we, belike not daring to address ourselves unto the proper presence of so august a judge, proffer our petitions of the things which we deem needful unto ourselves, as unto advocates informed by experience of our frailty. And this more we discern in him, full as he is of compassionate liberality towards us, that, whereas it chanceth whiles, the keenness of mortal eyes availing not in any wise to penetrate the secrets of the divine intent, that we peradventure, beguiled by report, make such an one our advocate unto his majesty, who is outcast from his presence with an eternal banishment, nevertheless he, from whom nothing is hidden, having regard rather to the purity of the suppliant's intent than to his ignorance, or to the reprobate estate of him whose intercession be invoketh, giveth ear unto those who pray unto the latter, as if he were in very deed blessed in his aspect. The which will manifestly appear from the story which I purpose to relate. I say manifestly, ensuing, not the judgment of God, but that of men. It is told, then, that Masciato Franzesi, being from a very rich and considerable merchant in France, become a knight, and it behoving him thereupon go into Tuscany with Messire Charles Sansterre, brother to the King of France, who had been required and bidden thither by Pope Boniface, found his affairs in one part and another sore embroiled, as those of merchants most times are, and was unable lightly or promptly to disentangle them, wherefore he bethought himself to commit them unto divers persons and made shift for all, save only he abode in doubt whom he might leave sufficient to the recovery of the credits he had given to certain Burgundians. The cause of his doubt was that he knew the Burgundians to be litigious, quarrelsome fellows, ill-conditioned and disloyal, and could not call one to mind, in whom he might put any trust, cursed enough to cope with their perversity. After long consideration of the matter, there came to his memory a certain Master Schiaparello de Prado, who came often to his house in Paris, and whom, for that he was little of person and mighty nice in his dress, the French, knowing not what Schiaparello meant, and thinking it be the same with Capello, to wit, in their vernacular, chaplet, called him, not Capello, but Schiapaletto, and accordingly as Schiapaletto he was known everywhere, whilst few knew him for Master Schiaparello. Now this said Schiapaletto was of this manner life, that, being a scrivener, he thought very great shame when as any of his instrument was found, and indeed he drew few such, other than false. Whilst of the latter he would have drawn as many as might be required of him, and these with a better will by way of gift than any other for a great wage. False witness he bore with especial delight, required or not required, and the greatest regard being in those times paid to oaths in France, as he recked nothing of forswearing himself. He knavishly gained all the suits concerning which he was called upon to tell the truth upon his faith. He took inordinate pleasure and was mighty diligent in stirring up troubles and enmities and scandals between friends and kinsfolk and whomsoever else, and the greater the mischiefs he saw ensue thereof, the more he rejoiced. If bidden to manslaughter or whatsoever other naughty deed, he went about it with a will, without ever saying nay thereto, and many a time of his proper choice he had been known to wound men and do them to death with his own hand. He was a terrible blasphemer of God and the saints, and that for every trifle, being the most choleric man alive. To church he went never, and all the sacraments thereof he flouted in abominable terms, as things of no account, whilst, on the other hand, he was still fain to haunt and use taverns and other lewd places. Of women he was as fond as dogs of the stick, but in the contrary he delighted more than any filthy fellow alive. He robbed and pillaged with as much conscience as a godly man would make oblation to God. He was a very glutton and a great wine-bibber, insomuch that by times it wrought him shameful mischief, and to boot, he was a notorious gamester and a caster of cogged dice. But why should I enlarge in so many words? He was belike the worst man that ever was born. His wickedness had long been upheld by the power and interest of Messer Macchiato, who had many a time safeguarded him as well from private persons, to whom he often did a mischief, as from the law, against which he was a perpetual offender. This Master Schiapaletto then, coming to Macchiato's mind, the latter, who was very well acquainted with his way of life, bethought himself that he should be such an one as the perversity of the Burgundians required, and accordingly, sending for him, he bespoke him thus: Master Schiapaletto, I am, as thou knowest, about altogether to withdraw hence, and having to do, amongst others, with certain Burgundians, men full of guile, I know none whom I may leave to recover my due from them more fitting than thyself, more by token that thou dost nothing at this present. Wherefore, and thou wilt undertake this, I will e'en procure thee the favour of the court, and give thee such part as shall be meet of that which thou shalt recover. Don Schiapaletto, who was then out of employ and ill-provided with the goods of the world, seeing him who had long been his stay and his refuge about to depart thence, lost no time in deliberation, but, as of necessity constrained, replied that he would well. They being come to an accord, Macchiato departed, and Schiapaletto, having gotten his patron's procuration and letters commendatory from the king, betook himself into Burgundy, where well nigh none knew him, and there, contrary to his nature, began courteously and blandly to seek to get in his payments and do that wherefore he was come thither, as if reserving choler and violence for a last resort. Dealing thus, and lodging in the house of two Florentines, brothers, who there lent at usance, and who entertained him with great honour for the love of Messer Macchiato, it chanced that he fell sick, Whereupon the two brothers promptly fetched physicians and servants to tend him and furnished him with all that behoved unto the recovery of his health. But every succor was in vain, for that, by the physician's report, the good man, who was now old and had lived disorderly, grew daily worse, as one who had a mortal sickness. Wherefore the two brothers were sore concerned, and one day, being pretty near the chamber where he lay sick, they began to take counsel together, saying one to the other, How shall we do with yonder fellow? We have a sorry bargain on our hands of his affair, for that to send him forth of our house, thus sick, were a sore reproach to us, and a manifest sign of little wit on our part, if the folk, who have seen us first receive him, and after let tend and medicine him with such solicitude, should now see him suddenly put out of our house, sick unto death as he is, without it being possible for him to have done aught that should displease us. On the other hand, he hath been so wicked a man that he will never consent to confess, or take any sacrament of the church, and he dying without confession, no church will receive his body, nay, he will be cast into a ditch, like a dog. Again, even if he do confess, his sins are so many and so horrible that the like will come of it, for that there is nor priest nor friar who can or will absolve him thereof. Wherefore, being unshriven, he will still be cast into the ditches. Should it happen thus, the people of the city, as well on account of our trade, which appeareth to them most iniquitous, and of which they missy all day, as of their itch to plunder us, seeing this, will rise up in riot and cry out, These Lombard dogs, whom the church refuseth to receive, are to be suffered here no longer, and they will run to our houses and despoil us not only of our good, but maybe of our lives, to boot. Wherefore in any case it will go ill with us, if yonder fellow die. Master Cipoletto, who, as we have said, lay near the place where the two brothers were in discourse, being quick of hearing, as is most times the case with the sick, heard what they said of him, and calling them to him, bespoke them thus, I will not have you anywise mizzed out of me, nor fear to take any hurt by me. I have heard what you say of me, and am well assured that it would happen even as you say, should matters pass as you expect, but it shall go otherwise. I have in my lifetime done God the Lord so many an affront that it will make neither more nor less, and I do him yet another at the point of death. Wherefore do you make shift to bring me the holiest and worthiest friar you may avail to have, if any such there be, and leave the rest to me, for that I will assuredly order your affairs, and mine own on such wise that all shall go well, and you shall have good cause to be satisfied. The two brothers, albeit they conceived no great hope of this, nevertheless betook themselves to a brotherhood of monks, and demanded some holy and learned man to hear the confession of a Lombard who lay sick in their house. There was given them a venerable brother of holy and good life, and a past master in holy writ, a very reverend man, for whom all the townsfolk had a very great and special regard, and they carried him to their house, where, coming to the chamber where Master Cipoletto lay and seating himself by his side, he began first tenderly to comfort him, and after asked him how long it was since he had confessed last, whereto Master Cipoletto, who had never confessed in his life, answered, Father, it hath been my usance to confess every week once at the least, and often more. It is true that, since I fell sick, to wit, these 8 days past, I have not confessed, such is the annoy that my sickness hath given me. Quoth the friar, My son, thou hast done well, and so must thou do henceforward. I see, since thou confessest so often, that I shall be at little pains either of hearing or questioning. Sir, answered Master Cipoletto, say not so. I have never confessed so much nor so often, but I would still fain make a general confession of all my sins that I could call to mind from the day of my birth to that of my confession. Wherefore I pray you, good my father, question me as punctually of everything, nay, everything, as if I had never confessed, and consider me not because I am sick, for that I had far liefer displease this my flesh than, in consulting its ease, do aught that might be the perdition of my soul, which my Saviour redeemed with his precious blood. These words much pleased the holy man, and seemed to him to argue a well-disposed mind. Wherefore, after he had much commended Master Cipoletto for that his usance, he asked him if he had ever sinned by way of lust with any woman. "Father," replied Master Cipoletto, sighing, "on this point I am ashamed to tell you the truth, fearing to sin by way of vainglory." Quoth the friar, "Speak in all security, for never did one sin by telling the truth, whether in confession or otherwise." "Then," said Master Cipoletto, "since you certify me of this, I will tell you, I am yet a virgin, even as I came forth of my mother's body." "Oh, blessed be thou of God!" cried the monk. "How well hast thou done? And doing thus, thou hast the more deserved, inasmuch as, and thou hadst more leisure to do the contrary than we, and whatsoever others are limited by any rule." After this he asked him if he had ever offended against God in the sin of gluttony, whereto Master Cipoletto answered, sighing, "I had he, and that many a time. For that, albeit over and above the Lenten fasts that are yearly observed of the devout, he had been wont to fast on bread and water 3 days at the least in every week. He had oftentimes, and especially when as he had endured any fatigue, either praying or going a pilgrimage, drunken the water with as much appetite and as keen a relish as great drinkers do wine. And many a time he had longed to have such homely salads of pottabs as women make when they go into the country, and whiles eating had given him more pleasure than him seemed it should do to one who fasteth for devotion, as did he. "My son," said the friar, "these sins are natural and very slight, and I would not therefore have thee burden thy conscience withal more than behoveth. It happeneth to every man, how devout soever he be, that, after long fasting, meat seemeth good to him, and after travail, drink." "Alack, father mine," rejoined Cipoletto, "tell me not this to comfort me. You must know I know that things done for the service of God should be done sincerely and with an ungrudging mind, and whoso doth otherwise sinneth." Quoth the friar, exceeding well pleased, "I am content that thou shouldst thus apprehend it, and thy pure and good conscience therein pleaseth me exceedingly. But tell me, hast thou sinned by way of avarice, desiring more than befitted, or withholding that which it behoved thee not to withhold?" "Father mine," replied Cipoletto, "I would not have you look to my being in the house of these usurers. I have naught to do here. Nay, I came hither to admonish and chasten them and turn them from this their abominable way of gain. And methinketh I should have made shift to do so, had not God thus visited me. But you must know that I was left a rich man by my father, of whose good, when he was dead, I bestowed the most part in alms, and after, to sustain my life, and that I might be able to succor Christ's poor, I have done my little traffickings. And in these I have desired to gain, but still with God's poor have I shared that which I gained, converting my own half to my occasion, and giving them the other, and in this so well hath my Creator prospered me that my affairs have still gone from good to better." "Well hast thou done," said the friar, "but hast thou often been angered?" "Oh," cried Master Cipoletto, "that I must tell you I have very often been. And who could keep himself therefrom, seeing men do unseemly things all day long, keeping not the commandments of God, neither fearing his judgment? Many times a day I had liefer been dead than alive, seeing young men follow after vanities, and hearing them curse and forswear themselves, haunting the taverns, visiting not the churches, and ensuing rather the ways of the world than that of God." "My son," said the friar, "this is a righteous anger, nor for my part might I enjoin thee any penance therefore. But hath anger at any time availed to move thee to do any manslaughter, or to bespeak any one unseemly, or do any other unright?" "Alack, sir," answered the sick man, "you, who seem to me a man of God, how can you say such words? Had I ever had the least thought of doing any one of the things whereof you speak, think you I believe that God would so long have forborne me? These be the doings of outlaws and men of naught, whereof I never saw any, but I said still, Go, may God amend thee." Then said the friar, "Now tell me, my son, blessed be thou of God, hast thou never borne false witness against any, or missaid of another, or taken others' good, without leave of him to whom it pertained?" "Aye, indeed, sir," replied Master Cipoletto, "I have missaid of others, for that I had a neighbor aforetime, who, with the greatest unright in the world, did not but beat his wife, insomuch that I once spoke ill of him to her kinsfolk. So great was the compassion that overcame me for the poor woman, whom he used as God alone can tell, whensoever he had drunken overmuch. Quoth the friar, Thou tellest me thou hast been a merchant. Hast thou never cheated anyone as merchants do whiles? I faith, yes, sir, answered Master Cipoletto, but I know not whom, except it were a certain man, who once brought me moneys which he owed me for cloth I had sold him, and which I threw into a chest, without counting. A good month after, I found that they were 4 farthings more than they should have been, wherefore, not seeing him again, and having kept them by me a full year, that I might restore them to him, I gave them away in alms. Quoth the friar, This was a small matter, and thou didst well to deal with it as thou didst. Then he questioned him of many other things, of all which he answered after the same fashion, and the Holy Father offering to proceed to absolution, Master Cipoletto said, Sir, I have yet sundry sins that I have not told you. The friar asked him what they were, and he answered, I mind me that one Saturday, after none, I caused my servant sweep out the house, and had not that reverence for the Lord's holy day which it behoved me have. Oh, said the friar, that is a light matter, my son. Nay, rejoined Master Cipoletto, call it not a light matter, for that the Lord's day is greatly to be honored, seeing that on such a day our Lord rose from the dead. Then said the friar, Well, hast thou done aught else? Aye, sir, answered Master Cipoletto, once, unthinking what I did, I spat in the church of God. Thereupon the friar fell a-smiling, and said, My son, that is no thing to be recked of. We who are of the clergy, we spit there all day long. And you do very ill. Rejoined Master Cipoletto, for that there is naught which it so straitly behoveth to keep clean as the holy temple wherein is rendered sacrifice to God. Brief, he told him great plenty of such like things, and presently fell a-sighing, and after weeping sore, as he knew full well to do, when as he would. Quoth the holy friar, What aileth thee, my son? Alas, sir, replied Master Cipoletto, I have one sin left, whereof I never yet confessed me, such shame have I to tell it, and every time I call it to mind, I weep, even as you see, and meseemeth very certain that God will never pardon it me. Go to, son, rejoined the friar, what is this thou sayest? If all the sins that were ever wrought, or are yet to be wrought of all mankind, what while the world endureth, were all in one man, and he repented him thereof, and were contrite therefore, as I see thee, such is the mercy and loving kindness of God that, upon confession, he would freely pardon them to him. Wherefore do thou tell it in all assurance. Quoth Master Cipoletto, still weeping sore, Alack, father mine is too great a sin, and I can scarce believe that it will ever be forgiven me of God, except your prayers strive for me. Then said the friar, Tell it me in all assurance, for I promise thee to pray God for thee. Master Cipoletto, however, still wept and said naught, but after he had thus held the friar a great while in suspense, he heaved a deep sigh and said, Father mine, since you promise me to pray God for me, I will e'en tell it you. Note then, that when I was little, I once cursed my mother. So saying, he fell again to weeping sore. O my son, quoth the friar, seemeth this to thee so heinous a sin? Why, men blaspheme God all day long, and he freely pardoneth whoso repenteth him of having blasphemed him, and deemest thou not he will pardon thee this? Weep not, but comfort thyself, for, certes, wert thou one of those who set him on the cross, he would pardon thee, in favor of such contrition as I see in thee. Alack, father mine, what say you? Replied Cipoletto. My kind mother, who bore me 9 months in her body, day and night, and carried me on her neck 100 times and more, I did passing ill to curse her, and it was an exceeding great sin, and except you pray God for me, it will not be forgiven me. The friar, then, seeing that Master Cipoletto had no more to say, gave him absolution and bestowed on him his benizon, holding him a very holy man and devoutly believing all that he had told him to be true. And who would not have believed it, hearing a man at the point of death speak thus? Then, after all this, he said to him, Master Cipoletto, With God's help you will speedily be whole. But should it come to pass that God call your blessed and well-disposed soul to himself, would it please you that your body be buried in our convent?" "Aye, would it, sir," replied Master Ciapoletto. "Nay, I would fain no be buried otherwhere, since you have promised to pray God for me, more by token that I have ever had a special regard for your order. Wherefore I pray you that when as you return to your lodging, you must cause bring me that most veritable body of Christ, which you consecrate a mornings upon the altar, for that, with your leave, I purpose, all unworthy as I am, to take it, and after holy and extreme unction, to the intent that, if I have lived as a sinner, I may at the least die like a Christian." The good friar replied that it pleased him much, and that he said well and promised to see it presently brought him, and so was it done. Meanwhile, the two brothers, misdoubting them sore lest Master Ciapoletto should play them false, had posted themselves behind a wainscot that divided the chamber where he lay from another, and listening, easily heard and apprehended that which he said to the friar, and had whiles so great a mind to laugh, hearing the things which he confessed to having done, that they were like to burst, and said, one to other, "What manner of man is this, whom neither old age nor sickness nor fear of death, whereunto he seeth himself near, nor yet of God, before whose judgment seat he looketh to be ere long, have availed to turn from his wickedness nor hinder him from choosing to die as he hath lived." However, seeing that he had so spoken that he should be admitted to burial in a church, they recked not of the rest. Master Ciapoletto presently took the sacrament, and, growing rapidly worse, received extreme unction, and a little after evensong of the day he had made his fine confession, he died, whereupon the two brothers, having, of his proper moneys, taken order for his honourable burial, sent to the convent to acquaint the friars therewith, bidding them come thither that night to hold vigil, according to usance, and fetch away the body in the morning, and meanwhile made ready all that was needful thereunto. The holy friar, who had shriven him, hearing that he had departed this life, betook himself to the prior of the convent, and, letting ring to chapter, gave out to the brethren therein assembled that Master Ciapoletto had been a holy man, according to that which he had gathered from his confession, and persuaded them to receive his body with the utmost reverence and devotion, in the hope that God should show forth many miracles through him. To this the prior and brethren credulously consented, and that same evening, coming all whereas Master Ciapoletto lay dead, they held high and solemn vigil over him, and on the morrow, clad all in albs and copes, book in hand and crosses before them, they went, chanting the while, for his body, and brought it with the utmost pomp and solemnity to their church, followed by well nigh all the people of the city, men and women. As soon as they had set the body down in the church, the holy friar, who had confessed him, mounted the pulpit and fell a-preaching marvellous things of the dead man and of his life, his fasts, his virginity, his simplicity and innocence and sanctity, recounting, amongst other things, that which he had confessed to him as his greatest sin, and how he had hardly availed to persuade him that God would forgive it him, thence passing on to reprove the folk who hearkened, and you, accursed that you are, quoth he, for every waif of straw that stirreth between your feet, you blaspheme God and the Virgin and all the host of heaven. Moreover, he told them many other things of his loyalty and purity of heart, brief, with his speech, whereto entire faith was yielded of the people of the city, he so established the dead man in the reverent consideration of all who were present that, no sooner was the service at an end, than they all with the utmost eagerness flocked to kiss his hands and feet, and the clothes were torn off his back, he holding himself blessed who might avail to have never so little thereof, and needs must they leave him thus all that day, so he might be seen and visited of all. The following night he was honourably buried in a marble tomb in one of the chapels of the church, and on the morrow the folk began incontinent to come and burn candles, and offer up prayers, and make vows to him, and hang images of wax at his shrine, according to the promise made. Nay, on such wise waxed the frame of his sanctity and men's devotion to him that there was scarce any who, being in adversity, would vow himself to another saint than him. And they styled and yet style him Saint Cipoletto, and avouch that God through him hath wrought many miracles, and yet worketh them every day for whoso devoutly commendeth himself unto him. Thus, then, lived and died Master Separello de Prado, and became a saint, as you have heard, nor would I deny it to be possible that he is beatified in God's presence, for that, albeit his life was wicked and perverse, he may at his last extremity have shown such contrition that peradventure God had mercy on him and received him into his kingdom. But, for that this is hidden from us, I reason according to that which is apparent, and say that he should rather be in the hands of the devil in perdition than in paradise. And if so it be, we may know from this how great is God's loving kindness towards us, which, having regard not to our error, but to the purity of our faith, when as we thus make an enemy, deeming him a friend, of his our intermediary, giveth ear unto us, even as if we had recourse unto one truly holy, as intercessor for his favor. Wherefore, to the end that by his grace we may be preserved safe and sound in this present adversity and in this so joyous company, let us, magnifying his name, in which we have begun our diversion, and holding him in reverence, commend ourselves to him in our necessities, well assured of being heard. And with this he was silent. The second story. Abraham the Jew, at the instigation of Jehannet de Chavannes, goeth to the court of Rome, and seeing the depravity of the clergy, returneth to Paris, and there becometh a Christian. Pamphilos's story was in part laughed at and altogether commended by the ladies, and it being come to its end, after being diligently hearkened, the queen bade Neophile, who sat next him, ensue the ordinance of the commenced diversion by telling one of her fashion. Neophile, who was distinguished no less by courteous manners than by beauty, answered blithely that she would well, and began on this wise: Pamphilo hath shown us in his story that God's benignness regardeth not our errors, when they proceed from that which is beyond our ken, and I, in mine, purpose to show you how this same benignness, patiently suffering the defaults of those who, being especially bounden both with words and deeds to bear true witness thereof, yet practice the contrary, exhibiteth unto us an infallible proof of itself, to the intent that we may, with the more constancy of mind, ensue that which we believe. As I have heard tell, gracious ladies, there was once in Paris a great merchant, and a very loyal and upright man, whose name was Jehannet de Chavannes, and who was of great traffic in silks and stuffs. He had particular friendship for a very rich Jew called Abraham, who was also a merchant, and a very honest and trusty man, and seeing the latter's worth and loyalty, it began to irk him sore that the soul of so worthy and discreet and good a man should go to perdition for default of faith, wherefore he fell to beseeching him on friendly wise leave the errors of the Jewish faith, and turn to the Christian verity, which he might see still wax and prosper, as being holy and good, whereas his own faith, on the contrary, was manifestly on the wane and dwindling to naught. The Jew made answer that he held no faith holy or good save only the Jewish, that in this latter he was born, and therein meant to live and die, nor should aught ever make him remove therefrom. Jehannet for all that desisted not from him, but some days after returned to the attack with similar words, showing him, on rude enough wise, for that merchants for the most part can know better, for what reasons our religion is better than the Jewish. And albeit the Jew was a past master in their law, nevertheless, whether it was the great friendship he bore Jehannet that moved him, or peradventure words wrought it that the Holy Ghost put into the good simple man's mouth, the latter's arguments began greatly to please him, but yet, persisting in his own belief, he would not suffer himself to be converted. Like as he abode obstinate, even so Jehannet never gave over importuning him, till at last the Jew, overcome by such continual insistence, said, Look you, Jehannet, thou wouldst have me become a Christian, and I am disposed to do it, insomuch, indeed, that I mean in the first place to go to Rome, and there see him who, thou sayest, is God's vicar upon earth, and consider his manners and fashions, and likewise those of his chief brethren. If these appear to me such that I may, by them, as well as by your words, apprehend that your faith is better than mine. Even as thou hast studied to show me, I will do as I have said, and if it be not so, I will remain a Jew as I am." When Jehannet heard this, he was beyond measure chagrined, and said in himself, "I have lost my pains, which meseemed I had right well bestowed, thinking to have converted this man, for that, and he go to the court of Rome, and see the lewd and wicked life of the clergy. Not only will he never become a Christian, but were he already a Christian, he would infallibly turn Jew again." Then, turning to Abraham, he said to him, "Alack, my friend, why wilt thou undertake this travail, and so great a charge as it will be to thee to go from here to Rome? More by token that, both by sea and by land, the road is full of perils for a rich man such as thou art. Thinkest thou not to find here who shall give thee baptism? Or, if peradventure thou have any doubts concerning the faith which I have propounded to thee, where are there greater doctors and men more learned in the matter than are here, or better able to resolve thee of that which thou wilt know or ask? Wherefore, to my thinking, this thy going is superfluous. Bethink thee that the prelates there are even such as those thou mayst have seen here, and indeed so much the better as they are nearer unto the chief pastor. Wherefore, and thou wilt be counselled by me, thou wilt reserve this travail unto another time against some jubilee or other, whereunto it may be I will bear thee company." To this the Jew made answer, "I doubt not, Jehannet, but it is as thou tellest me, but, to sum up many words in one, I am altogether determined, and thou wouldst have me do that whereof thou hast so instantly besought me, to go thither. Else will I never do aught thereof." Jehannet, seeing his determination, said, "Go, and good luck go with thee." And inwardly assured that he would never become a Christian, when once he should have seen the court of Rome, but availing nothing in the matter, he desisted. The Jew mounted to horse, and as quickly as he might betook himself to the court of Rome. He was honorably entertained of his brethren, and there abiding, without telling any the reason of his coming. He began diligently to inquire into the manners and fashions of the Pope and cardinals and other prelates and of all the members of his court, and what with that which he himself noted, being a mighty quick-witted man, and that which he gathered from others, he found all, from the highest to the lowest, most shamefully given to the sin of lust, and that not only in the way of nature, but after the sodomitical fashion, without any restraint of remorse or shamefastness, insomuch that the interest of courtesans and catamites was of no small avail there in obtaining any considerable thing. Moreover, he manifestly perceived them to be universally gluttons, wine-bibbers, drunkards, and slaves to their bellies, brute beast fashion, more than to aught else after lust. And looking farther, he saw them all covetous and greedy after money, insomuch that human, nay, Christian blood, no less than things sacred, whatsoever they might be, whether pertaining to the sacrifices of the altar or to the benefices of the church, they sold and bought indifferently for a price, making a greater traffic and having more brokers thereof than folk at Paris of silks and stuffs or what not else. Manifest simony they had christened procuration and gluttony sustentation, as if God apprehended not, let be the meaning of words, but the intention of depraved minds, and would suffer himself, after the fashion of men, to be duped by the names of things. All this, together with much else which must be left unsaid, was supremely displeasing to the Jew, who was a sober and modest man, and him seeming he had seen enough, he determined to return to Paris, and did so. As soon as Jehannet knew of his return, he betook himself to him, hoping nothing less than that he should become a Christian, and they greeted each other with the utmost joy. Then, after Abraham had rested some days, Jehannet asked him how him seemed of the Holy Father and of the cardinals and others of his court. Whereto the Jew promptly answered, "Meseemeth, God give them ill one and all. And I say this for that, if I was able to observe aright no piety, no devoutness, no good work or example of life, or other what did I see there in any who was a churchman, nay, but lust, covetise, gluttony, and the like, and worse, if worse can be. Me seem to be there in such favor, with all that I hold it for a forging place of things diabolical rather than divine. And as far as I can judge, meseemeth your chief pastor and consequently all the others endeavor with all diligence and all their wit and every art to bring to naught and banish from the world the Christian religion, whereas they should be its foundation and support. And for that I see that this whereafter they strive cometh not to pass, but that your religion continually increaseth and waxeth still brighter and more glorious. Meseemeth, I manifestly discern that the Holy Spirit is verily the foundation and support thereof, as of that which is true and holy over any other. Wherefore, whereas aforetime I abode obdurate and insensible to thine exhortations, and would not be persuaded to embrace thy faith, I now tell thee frankly that for nothing in the world would I forbear to become a Christian. Let us, then, to church, and there have me baptized, according to the rite and ordinance of your holy faith. Jehannet, who looked for a directly contrary conclusion to this, was the joyfullest man that might be, when he heard him speak thus, and repairing with him to Our Lady's Church of Paris, required the clergy there to give Abraham baptism. They, hearing that the Jew himself demanded it, straightway proceeded to baptize him, whilst Jehannet raised him from the sacred font, and named him Giovanni. After this, he had him thoroughly lessoned by men of great worth and learning in the tenets of our holy faith, which he speedily apprehended, and thenceforward was a good man and a worthy and one of a devout life. The third story. Melchizedek the Jew, with a story of 3 rings, escapeth a parlous snare set for him by Saladin. Neophile having made an end of her story, which was commended of all, Philomena, by the queen's good pleasure, proceeded to speak thus. The story told by Neophile bringeth to my mind a parlous case the once betided a Jew, and for that, it having already been excellent well spoken both of God and of the verity of our faith, it should not henceforth be forbidden us to descend to the doings of mankind and the events that have befallen them. I will now proceed to relate to you the case aforesaid, which having heard, you will peradventure become more wary in answering the questions that may be put to you. You must know, lovesome companions mine, that, like as folly ofttimes draweth folk forth of happy estate, and casteth them into the utmost misery, even so doth good sense extricate the wise man from the greatest perils, and place him in assurance and tranquillity. How true it is that folly bringeth many an one from fair estate unto misery is seen by multitude of examples, with the recounting whereof we have no present concern, considering that 1,000 instances thereof do every day manifestly appear to us. But that good sense is a cause of solacement I will, as I promised, briefly show you by a little story. Saladin, whose valor was such that not only from a man of little account it made him Soldan of Babylon, but gained him many victories over kings Saracen and Christian, having in divers wars and in the exercise of his extraordinary munificences expended his whole treasure, and having an urgent occasion for a good sum of money nor seeing whence he might avail to have it as promptly as it behoved him, called to mind a rich Jew, by name Melchizedek, who lent it usance in Alexandria, and bethought himself that this latter had the wherewithal to oblige him, and he would, but he was so miserly that he would never have done it of his free will, and Saladin was loath to use force with him, wherefore, need constraining him, he set his every wit a work to find a means how the Jew might be brought to serve him in this, and presently concluded to do him a violence coloured by some show of reason. Accordingly he sent for Melchizedek, and receiving him familiarly, seated him by himself, then said to him, Honest man, I have understood from divers persons that thou art a very learned man and deeply versed in matters of divinity. Wherefore I would fain know of thee whether of the 3 laws thou reputest the true, the Jewish, the Saracen, or the Christian. The Jew, who was in truth a man of learning and understanding, perceived but too well that Saladin looked to entrap him in words, so he might fasten a quarrel on him, and bethought himself that he could not praise any of the 3 more than the others, without giving him the occasion he sought. Accordingly, sharpening his wits, as became one who felt himself in need of an answer by which he might not be taken at advantage, there speedily occurred to him that which it behoved him reply, and he said, My lord, The question that you propound to me is a nice one, and to acquaint you with that which I think of the matter, it behoveth me tell you a little story, which you shall hear. And I mistake not, I mind me to have many a time heard tell that there was once a great man and a rich, who among other very precious jewels in his treasury, had a very goodly and costly ring, whereunto being minded, for its worth and beauty, to do honor, and wishing to leave it in perpetuity to his descendants, he declared that whichsoever of his sons should, at his death, be found in possession thereof, by his bequest unto him, should be recognized as his heir, and be held of all the others in honor and reverence as chief and head. He to whom the ring was left by him held a like course with his own descendants, and did even as his father had done. In brief, the ring passed from hand to hand, through many generations, and came at last into the possession of a man who had 3 goodly and virtuous sons, all very obedient to their father, wherefore he loved them all 3 alike. The young men, knowing the usance of the ring, each for himself, desiring to be the most honored among his folk, as best he might, besought his father, who was now an old man, to leave him the ring, whenas he came to die. The worthy man, who loved them all alike and knew not himself how to choose to which he had liefer leave the ring, bethought himself, having promised it to each, to seek to satisfy all 3, and privily let make by a good craftsman other 2 rings, which were so like unto the first that he himself scarce knew which was the true. When he came to die, he secretly gave each one of his sons his ring, wherefore each of them, seeking after their father's death, to occupy the inheritance and the honor, and denying it to the others, produced his ring, in witness of his right. And the 3 rings being found so like unto one another that the true might not be known, the question which was the father's very heir abode pending, and yet pendeth. And so say I to you, my lord, of the 3 laws to the 3 peoples given of God the Father, whereof you question me, each people deemeth itself to have his inheritance, his true law, and his commandments, but of which in very deed hath them, even as of the rings. The question yet pendeth. Saladin perceived that the Jew had excellently well contrived to escape the snare which he had spread before his feet, wherefore he concluded to discover to him his need and see if he were willing to serve him, and so accordingly he did, confessing to him that which he had it in mind to do, had he not answered him on such discreet wise. The Jew freely furnished him with all that he required, and the Soldan after satisfied him in full. Moreover, he gave him very great gifts, and still had him to friend and maintained him about his own person in high and honorable estate. The 4th story. A monk, having fallen into a sin deserving of very grievous punishment, adroitly reproaching the same fault to his abbot, quitteth himself of the penalty. Philomena, having dispatched her story, was now silent, whereupon Dioneo, who sat next her, knowing already, by the ordinance begun, that it fell to his turn to tell, proceeded, without awaiting farther commandment from the queen, to speak on this wise. Lovesome ladies, if I have rightly apprehended the intention of you all, we are here to divert ourselves with storytelling, wherefore, so but it be not done contrary to this our purpose, I hold it lawful unto each, even as our queen told us a while agone, to tell such story as he deemeth may afford most entertainment. Accordingly, having heard how, by the good counsels of Jehannet de Chevine, Abraham had his soul saved, and how Melchizedek, by his good sense, defended his riches from Saladin's ambushes, I purpose, without looking for reprehension from you, briefly to relate with what address a monk delivered his body from a very grievous punishment. There was in Lunigiana, a country not very far hence, a monastery whilera more abounding in sanctity and monks than it is nowadays, and therein, among others, was a young monk, whose vigor and lustiness neither fasts nor vigils availed to mortify. It chanced one day, towards noontide, when all the other monks slept, that, as he went all alone round about the convent, which stood in a very solitary place, he espied a very well-favoured lass, belike some husbandman's daughter of the country, who went about the fields culling certain herbs, and no sooner had he set eyes on her than he was violently assailed by carnal appetite. Wherefore, accosting her, he entered into parley with her, and so led on from one thing to another that he came to an accord with her and brought her to his cell, unperceived of any, but whilst, carried away by overmuch ardour, he disported himself with her less cautiously than was prudent, it chanced that the abbot arose from sleep and softly passing by the monk's cell, heard the racket that the twain made together, whereupon he came stealthily up to the door to listen, that he might the better recognize the voices, and manifestly perceiving that there was a woman in the cell, was at first minded to cause open to him, but after bethought himself to hold another course in the matter, and, returning to his chamber, awaited the monk's coming forth. The latter, all taken up as he was with the wench and his exceeding pleasure and delight in her company, was none the less on his guard, and him seeming he heard some scuffling of feet in the dormitory. He set his eye to a crevice, and plainly saw the abbot stand hearkening unto him, whereby he understood but too well that the latter must have gotten wind of the wench's presence in his cell, and knowing that sore punishment would ensue to him thereof, he was beyond measure chagrined. However, without discovering aught of his concern to the girl, he hastily revolved many things in himself, seeking to find some means of escape, and presently hit upon a rare device, which went straight to the mark he aimed at. Accordingly, making a show of thinking he had abidden long enough with the damsel, he said to her, I must go cast about for a means how thou mayest win forth hence, without being seen, wherefore do thou abide quietly until my return. Then, going forth and locking the cell door on her, he betook himself straight to the abbot's chamber, and presenting him with the key, according as each monk did, when as he went abroad, said to him, with a good countenance, Sir, I was unable to make an end this morning of bringing off all the faggots I had cut, wherefore with your leave I will presently go to the wood and fetch them away. The abbot, deeming the monk unaware that he had been seen of him, was glad of such an opportunity to inform himself more fully of the offense committed by him, and accordingly took the key and gave him the leave he sought. Then, as soon as he saw him gone, he fell to considering which he should rather do, whether open his cell in the presence of all the other monks, and cause them to see his default, so they might after have no occasion to murmur against himself, whenas he should punish the offender, or seek first to learn from the girl herself how the thing had passed, and, bethinking himself that she might perchance be the wife or daughter of such a man that he would be loath to have done her the shame of showing her to all the monks, he determined first to see her and after come to a conclusion, wherefore, betaking himself to the cell, he opened it and, entering, shut the door after him. The girl, seeing the abbot enter, was all aghast and fell a-weeping for fear of shame, but my lord abbot, casting his eyes upon her, and seeing her young and handsome, old as he was, suddenly felt the pricks of the flesh no less importunate than his young monk had done, and fell a-saying in himself, Mary, why should I not take somewhat of pleasure, when as I may, more by token that displeasance and annoy are still at hand, whenever I have a mind to them. This is a handsome wench, and is here unknown of any in the world. If I can bring her to do my pleasure, I know not why I should not do it. Who will know it? No one will ever know it, and a sin that's hidden is half forgiven. Maybe this chance will never occur again. I hold it great sense to avail ourselves of a good, when as God the Lord sendeth us thereof. So saying, and having altogether changed purpose from that wherewith he came, he drew near to the girl and began gently to comfort her, praying her not to weep, and passing from one word to another, he ended by discovering to her his desire. The girl, who was neither iron nor adamant, readily enough lent herself to the pleasure of the abbot, who, after he had clipped and kissed her again and again, mounted upon the monk's pallet, and having the like regard to the grave burden of his dignity and the girl's tender age, and fearful of irking her for overmuch heaviness, bestrode not her breast, but set her upon his own, and so a great while disported himself with her. Meanwhile, the monk, who had only made believe to go to the wood and had hidden himself in the dormitory, was altogether reassured, when as he saw the abbot enter his cell alone, doubting not but his device should have effect, and when he saw him lock the door from within, he held it for certain. Accordingly, coming forth of his hiding place, he stealthily betook himself to a crevice, through which he both heard and saw all that the abbot did and said. When it seemed to the latter that he had tarried long enough with the damsel, he locked her in the cell and returned to his own chamber, whence, after a while, he heard the monk stirring and deeming him returned from the wood, thought to rebuke him severely and cast him into prison, so himself might alone possess the prey he had gotten, wherefore, sending for him, he very grievously rebuked him, and with a stern countenance, and commanded that he should be put in prison. The monk very readily answered, "Sir, I have not yet pertained long enough to the order of Saint Benedict to have been able to learn every particular thereof, and you had not yet shown me that monks should make of women a means of mortification, as of fasts and vigils, but now that you have shown it me, I promise you, so you will pardon me this default, never again to offend therein, but still to do as I have seen you do." The abbot, who was a quick-witted man, readily understood that the monk not only knew more than himself, but had seen what he did, wherefore, his conscience pricking him for his own default, he was ashamed to inflict on the monk a punishment which he himself had merited even as he. Accordingly, pardoning him and charging him keep silence of that which he had seen, they privily put the girl out of doors, and it is believed that they caused her return thither more than once thereafterward. The fifth story. The Marchioness of Monferrato, with a dinner of hens and certain sprightly words, curbeth the extravagant passion of the King of France. The story told by Dioneo at first pricked the hearts of the listening ladies with somewhat of shamefastness, whereof a modest redness appearing in their faces gave token, but after, looking one at other and being scarce able to keep their countenance, they listened, laughing in their sleeves. The end thereof being come, after they had gently chid him, giving him to understand that such tales were not fit to be told among ladies, the queen, turning to Fiammetta, who sat next him on the grass, bade her follow on the ordinance. Accordingly, she began with a good grace and a cheerful countenance. "It hath occurred to my mind, fair my ladies, at once, because it pleaseth me that we have entered upon showing by stories how great is the efficacy of prompt and goodly answers, and because, like as in men it is great good sense to seek still to love a lady of higher lineage than themselves, so in women it is great discretion to know how to keep themselves from being taken with the love of men of greater condition than they. To set forth to you, in the story which it falleth to me to tell, how both with deeds and words a noble lady guarded herself against this, and diverted another therefrom. The Marquis of Monferrato, a man of high worth and gonfalonier of the church, had passed beyond seas on the occasion of a general crusade undertaken by the Christians, arms in hand. And it being one day discoursed of his merit at the court of King Philip le Born, who was then making ready to depart France upon the same crusade, it was avouched by a gentleman present that there was not under the stars a couple to match with the Marquis and his lady, for that, even as he was renowned among knights for every virtue, so was she the fairest and noblest of all the ladies in the world. These words took such hold upon the mind of the King of France that, without having seen the Marchioness, he fell of a sudden ardently in love with her and determined to take ship for the crusade, on which he was to go no otherwhere than at Genoa, in order that, journeying thither by land, he might have an honourable occasion of visiting the Marchioness, doubting not but that, the Marquis being absent, he might avail to give effect to his desire. As he had bethought himself, so he put his thought into execution, for, having sent forward all his power, he set out, attended only by some few gentlemen, and coming within a day's journey of the Marquis's domains, dispatched a vaunt-courier to bid the lady expect him the following morning to dinner. The Marchioness, who was well advised and discreet, replied blithely that in this he did her the greatest of favours, and that he would be welcome, and after bethought herself what this might mean that such a king should come to visit her in her husband's absence. Nor was she deceived in the conclusion to which she came, to wit, that the report of her beauty drew him thither. Nevertheless, like a brave lady as she was, she determined to receive him with honor, and summoning to her councils sundry gentlemen of those who remained there, with their help, she let provide for everything needful. The ordinance of the repast and of the viands she reserved to herself alone, and having forthright caused collect as many hens as were in the country, she bade her cooks dress various dishes of these alone for the royal table. The king came at the appointed time, and was received by the lady with great honor and rejoicing. When he beheld her, she seemed to him fair and noble and well-bred beyond that which he had conceived from the courtier's words, whereat he marvelled exceedingly and commended her amain, waxing so much the hotter in his desire as he found the lady overpassing his foregone conceit of her. After he had taken somewhat of rest in chambers adorned to the utmost with all that pertaineth to the entertainment of such a king, the dinner hour being come, the king and the marchioness seated themselves at one table, whilst the rest, according to their quality, were honourably entertained at others. The king, being served with many dishes in succession, as well as with wines of the best and costliest, and to boot gazing with delight the while upon the lovely marchioness, was mightily pleased with his entertainment. But after a while, as the viands followed one upon another, he began somewhat to marvel, perceiving that, for all the diversity of the dishes, they were nevertheless of naught other than hens, and this although he knew the part where he was to be such as should abound in game of various kinds, and although he had, by advising the lady in advance of his coming, given her time to send a hunting. However, much as he might marvel at this, he chose not to take occasion of engaging her in parley thereof, otherwise than in the matter of her hens, and accordingly, turning to her with a merry air, "Madam," quoth he, "are hens only born in these parts, without ever a cock?" The marchioness, who understood the king's question excellent well, her seeming God had vouchsafed her, according to her wish, an opportune occasion of discovering her mind, turned to him and answered boldly, "Nay, my lord, but women, albeit in apparel and dignities they may differ somewhat from others, are natheless all of the same fashion here as elsewhere." The king, hearing this, right well apprehended the meaning of the banquet of hens and the virtue hidden in her speech, and perceived that words would be wasted upon such a lady, and that violence was out of the question, wherefore, even as he had ill-advisedly taken fire for her, so now it behoved him sagely, for his own honour's sake, stifle his ill-conceived passion. Accordingly, without making any more words with her, for fear of her replies, he dined, out of all hope, and the meal ended, thanking her for the honourable entertainment he had received from her and commending her to God, he set out for Genoa. So by his prompt departure he might make amends for his unseemly visit. The sixth story. An honest man, with a chance pleasantry, putteth to shame the perverse hypocrisy of the religious orders. Emilia, who sat next after Fiammetta, the courage of the marchioness and the quaint rebuke administered by her to the King of France having been commended of all the ladies, began, by the Queen's pleasure, boldly to speak as follows: "I also. I will not keep silence of a biting reproof given by an honest layman to a covetous monk with a speech no less laughable than commendable. There was, then, dear lasses, no great while agone, in our city, a minor friar and inquisitor of heretical pravity, who, for all he studied hard to appear a devout and tender lover of the Christian religion, as do they all, was no less diligent in inquiring of who had a well-filled purse than of whom he might find wanting in the things of the faith. Thanks to this his diligence, he lit by chance upon a good simple man, richer, by far in coin than in wit, who, of no lack of religion, but speaking thoughtlessly and belike overheated with wine or excessive mirth, chanced one day to say to a company of his friends that he had a wine so good that Christ himself might drink thereof. This being reported to the inquisitor, and he understanding that the man's means were large and his purse well filled, ran in a violent hurry cum gladius et fustivus to clap up a right grievous suit against him, looking not for an amendment of mid-belief in the defendant, but for the filling of his own hand with florins to ensue thereof, as indeed it did, and causing him to be cited, asked him if that which had been alleged against him were true. The good man replied that it was, and told him how it chanced, whereupon quoth the most holy inquisitor, who was a devotee of St. John Goldenbeard, "Then hast thou made Christ a wine-bibber and curious in wines of choice, as if he were Sicilian, or what not other of your drunken sots and tavern haunters, and now thou speakest lowly, and wouldst feign this to be a very light matter. It is not as thou deemest. Thou hast merited the fire therefore, and we were minded to deal with thee as we ought." With these and many other words he bespoke him, with as menacing a countenance as if the poor wretch had been Epicurus denying the immortality of the soul, and in brief so terrified him that the good simple soul, by means of certain intermediaries, let grease his palm with a good dose of St. John Goldenmouth's ointment, the which is a sovereign remedy for the pestilential covetise of the clergy, and especially of the minor brethren, who dare not touch money, so he should deal mercifully with him. This unguent, being of great virtue, albeit Galen speaketh not thereof in any part of his medicines, wrought to such purpose that the fire denounced against him was by favor commuted into the wearing, by way of penance, of a cross. And to make the finer banner, as he were to go a crusading beyond seas, the inquisitor imposed it him yellow upon black. Moreover, when as he had gotten the money, he detained him about himself some days, enjoining him, by way of penance, hear a mass every morning at Santa Croce, and present himself before him at dinner time, and after that he might do what most pleased him the rest of the day, all which he diligently performed. One morning, amongst others, it chanced that at the Mass he heard a gospel, wherein these words were chanted, "For every one ye shall receive 100 and shall possess eternal life." This he laid fast up in his memory, and according to the commandment given him, presented him at the eating hour before the inquisitor, whom he found at dinner. The friar asked him if he had heard Mass that morning, whereto he promptly answered, "I have I, sir." Quoth the inquisitor, "Heardest thou aught therein whereof thou doubtest, or would question?" "Certes," replied the good man, "I doubt not of aught that I heard, but do firmly believe all to be true. I did indeed hear something which caused, and yet causeth me have the greatest compassion of you and your brother friars, bethinking me of the ill case wherein you will find yourselves over yonder in the next life." "And what was it that moved thee to such compassion of us?" asked the inquisitor. "Sir," answered the other, "it was that verse of the Evangel, which saith, 'For every one ye shall receive 100. "That is true," rejoined the inquisitor, "but why did these words move thee thus?" "Sir," replied the good man, "I will tell you. Since I have been used to resort hither, I have seen give out every day to a multitude of poor folk now one and now two vast great cauldrons of broth, which had been taken away from before yourself and the other brethren of this convent, as superfluous. Wherefore, if for each one of these cauldrons of broth there be rendered you 100 in the world to come, you will have so much thereof that you will assuredly all be drowned therein." All who were at the inquisitor's table fell a-laughing, but the latter, feeling the hit at the broth-swilling hypocrisy of himself and his brethren, was mightily incensed, and, but that he had gotten blame for that which he had already done, he would have saddled him with another prosecution, for that with a laughable speech he had rebuked him and his brother good-for-noughts, wherefore, of his despite, he bade him thenceforward do what most pleased him and not come before him again. The seventh story. Bergamino, with a story of Promaso and the abbot of Cluny, courteously rebuketh a fit of parsimony newly come to Messer Cane della Scala. Amelia's pleasantness and her story moved the queen and all the rest to laugh and applaud the rare conceit of this new-fangled crusader. Then, after the laughter had subsided and all were silent again, Philostrato, whose turn it was to tell, began to speak on this wise: "It is a fine thing, noble ladies, to hit a mark that never stirreth, but it is well nigh miraculous if, when someone wanted thing appeareth of a sudden, it be forthright stricken of an archer. The lewd and filthy life of the clergy, in many things as it were a constant mark for malice, giveth without much difficulty occasion to all who have a mind to speak of, to gird at and rebuke it, wherefore, albeit the worthy man, Who pierced the inquisitor to the quick, touching the hypocritical charity of the friars, who give to the poor that which it should behove them cast to the swine or throw away, did well. I hold him much more to be commended, of whom, the foregoing tale moving me thereto, I am to speak, and who with a quaint story rebuked Messer Cane della Scala, a magnificent nobleman, of a sudden and unaccustomed niggardliness newly appeared in him, figuring, in the person of another, that which he purposed to say to him concerning themselves, the which was on this wise. As very manifest renown proclaimeth well nigh throughout the whole world, Messer Cane della Scala, to whom in many things fortune was favorable, was one of the most notable and most magnificent gentlemen that have been known in Italy since the days of the Emperor Frederick II. Being minded to make a notable and wonder-goodly entertainment in Verona, whereunto many folk should have come from divers parts, and especially men of art of all kinds, he of a sudden, whatever might have been the cause, withdrew therefrom, and having in a measure requited those who were come thither, dismissed them all, save only one, Bergamino by name, a man ready of speech and accomplished beyond the credence of whoso had not heard him, who, having received neither largesse nor dismissal, abode behind, in the hope that his stay might prove to his future advantage. But Messer Cane had taken it into his mind that what things soever he might give him were far worse bestowed than if it had been thrown into the fire, nor of this did he bespeak him or let tell him aught. Bergamino, after some days, finding himself neither called upon nor required unto aught that pertained to his craft, and wasting his substance, to boot, in the hostelry with his horses and his servants, began to be sore concerned, but waited yet, him seeming he would not do well to depart. Now he had brought with him 3 goodly and rich suits of apparel, which had been given him of other noblemen, that he might make a brave appearance at the festival, and his host pressing for payment, he gave one thereof to him. After this, tarrying yet longer, it behoved him give the host the 2nd suit, and he would abide longer with him, and withal he began to live upon the 3rd, resolved to abide in expectation so long as this should last and then depart. Whilst he thus fed upon the 3rd suit, he chanced one day, Messer Cane being at dinner, to present himself before him with a rueful countenance, and Messer Cane, seeing this, more by way of rallying him than of intent to divert himself with any of his speech, said to him, What aileth thee, Bergamino, to stand thus disconsolate? Tell us somewhat. Whereupon Bergamino, without a moment's hesitation, forthright, as if he had long considered it, related the following story to the purpose of his own affairs. My lord, said he, you must know that Promaso was a very learned grammarian and a skillful and ready verse-maker above all others, which things rendered him so notable and so famous that, albeit he might not everywhere be known by sight, there was well nigh none who knew him not by name and by report. It chanced that, finding himself once at Paris in poor case, as indeed he abode most times, for that worth is little prized of those who can most, he heard speak of the abbot of Cluny, who is believed to be, barring the Pope, the richest prelate of his revenues that the Church of God possesseth, and of him he heard tell marvellous and magnificent things, in that he still held open house, nor were meat and drink ever denied to any who went whereas he might be. So, but he sought at what time the abbot was at meat. Promaso, hearing this, and being one who delighted in looking upon men of worth and nobility, determined to go see the magnificence of this abbot, and inquired how near he then abode to Paris. It was answered him that he was then at a place of his maybe 6 miles thence, wherefore Promaso thought to be there at dinner time, by starting in the morning betimes. Accordingly, he inquired the way, but, finding none bound thither, he feared lest he might go astray by mischance and happen on a part where there might be no victuals so readily to be found, wherefore, in order that, if this should betide, he might not suffer for lack of food, he bethought himself to carry with him 3 cakes of bread, judging that water, albeit it was little to his taste, he should find everywhere. The bread he put in his bosom, and setting out, was fortunate enough to reach the abbot's residence before the eating hour. He entered and went spying all about, and seeing the great multitude of tables set, and the mighty preparations making in the kitchen, and what not else provided against dinner, said in himself, Of a truth this abbot is as magnificent as folk say. After he had abidden a while intent upon these things, the abbot's seneschal, eating time being come, bade bring water for the hands, which being done, he seated each man at table, and it chanced that Primaso was set right over against the door of the chamber, whence the abbot should come forth into the eating hall. Now it was the usance in that house that neither wine nor bread nor aught else of meat or drink should ever be set on the tables, except the abbot were first came to sit at his own table. Accordingly, the seneschal, having set the tables, let tell the abbot that, when as it pleased him, the meat was ready. The abbot let open the chamber door, that he might pass into the saloon, and looking before him as he came, as chance would have it, the first who met his eyes was Primaso, who was very ill accoutred, and whom he knew not by sight. When he saw him, incontinent there came into his mind an ill thought, and one that had never yet been there, and he said in himself, See to whom I give my substance to eat. Then, turning back, he bade shut the chamber door, and inquired of those who were about him if any knew yonder losel who sat at table over against his chamber door, but all answered no. Meanwhile Primaso, who had a mind to eat, having come a journey and being unused to fast, waited a while, and seeing that the abbot came not, pulled out of his bosom one of the 3 cakes of bread he had brought with him, and fell to eating. The abbot, after he had waited a while, bade one of his serving men look if Primaso were gone, and the man answered, No, my lord, nay, he eateth bread, which it seemeth he hath brought with him. Quoth the abbot, Well, let him eat of his own, and he have thereof, for of ours he shall not eat today. Now he would fain have had Primaso depart of his own motion, him seeming it were not well done to turn him away, but the latter, having eaten 1 cake of bread, and the abbot coming not, began upon the second, the which was likewise reported to the abbot, who had caused look if he were gone. At last, the abbot still tarrying, Primaso, having eaten the 2nd cake, began upon the 3rd, and this again was reported to the abbot, who fell a pondering in himself, and saying, Alack, what new maggot is this that is come into my head today? What avarice? What despite? And for whom? This many a year have I given my substance to eat to whosoever had a mind thereto, without regarding if he were gentle or simple, poor or rich, merchant or huckster, and have seen it with mine own eyes squandered by a multitude of ribald knaves, nor ever yet came there to my mind the thought that hath entered into me for yonder man. Of a surety avarice cannot have assailed me for a man of little account. Needs must this who seemeth to me a losel be some great matter, since my soul hath thus repugned to do him honor. So saying, he desired to know who he was, and finding that it was Primaso, whom he had long known by report for a man of merit, come thither to see with his own eyes that which he had heard of his magnificence, was ashamed and eager to make him amends, studied in many ways to do him honor. Moreover, after eating, he caused clothe him sumptuously, as befitted his quality, and giving him money and a palfrey, left it to his own choice to go or stay, whereupon Primaso, well pleased with his entertainment, rendered him the best thanks in his power, and returned on horseback to Paris, whence he had set out afoot. Messer Cane, who was a gentleman of understanding, right well apprehended Bergamino's meaning, without further exposition, and said to him, smiling, Bergamino, thou hast very aptly set forth to me thy wrongs and merit, and my niggardliness, as well as that which thou wouldst have of me, and in good sooth, never, save now on thine account, have I been assailed of parsimony, but I will drive it away with that same stick which thou thyself hast shown me. Then, letting pay Bergamino's host, and clothing himself most sumptuously in a suit of his own apparel, he gave him money and a palfrey, and committed to his choice for the nonce to go or stay. The 8th story. Guglielmo Borsiere, with some quaint words, rebuketh the niggardliness of Messer Ermino de Grimaldi. Next Philostrato sat Loretta, who, after she had heard Bergamino's address commended, perceiving that it behoved her tell somewhat, began, without awaiting any commandment, blithely to speak thus. The foregoing story, dear companions, bringeth me in mind to tell how an honest minstrel unlike wise and not without fruit rebuked the covetise of a very rich merchant, the which, albeit in effect it resembleth the last story, should not therefore be less agreeable to you, considering that good came thereof in the end. There was, then, in Genoa, a good while agone, a gentleman called Messer Ermino da Grimaldi, who, according to general belief, far overpassed in wealth of lands and moneys the riches of whatsoever other richest citizen was then known in Italy. And like as he excelled all other Italians in wealth, even so in avarice and sordidness he outwent beyond compare every other miser and curmudgeon in the world, for not only did he keep a straight purse in the matter of hospitality, but, contrary to the general usance of the Genoese, who are wont to dress sumptuously, he suffered the greatest privations in things necessary to his own person, no less than in meat and in drink, rather than be at any expense, by reason whereof the surname de Grimaldi had fallen away from him, and he was deservedly called of all only Messer Ermino Avarizia. It chanced that, whilst, by dint of spending naught, he multiplied his wealth, there came to Genoa a worthy minstrel, both well-bred and well-spoken, by name Guglielmo Borsiere, a man no whit like those of the present day, who, to the no small reproach of the corrupt and blameworthy usances of those who nowadays would fain be called and reputed gentlefolk and seigneurs, are rather to be styled asses, reared in all the beastliness and depravity of the basest of mankind, than minstrels, bred in the courts of kings and princes. In those times it used to be a minstrel's office and his wont to expend his pains in negotiating treaties of peace, where feuds or despites had befallen between noblemen, or transacting marriages, alliances, and friendships, in solacing the minds of the weary and diverting courts with quaint and pleasant sayings, aye, and with sharp reproofs, father-like, rebuking the misdeeds of the froward, and this for slight enough reward. But nowadays they study to spend their time in hawking evil reports from one to another, in sowing discord, in speaking naughtiness and obscenity, and, what is worse, doing them in all men's presence, in imputing evil doings, lewdnesses and knaveries, true or false, one to other, and in prompting men of condition with treacherous allurements to base and shameful actions. And he is most cherished and honored and most munificently entertained and rewarded of the sorry, unmannerly nobleman of our time who saith and doth the most abominable words and deeds. A sore and shameful reproach to the present age, and a very manifest proof that the virtues have departed this lower world, and left us wretched mortals to wallow in the slough of the vices. But to return to my story, from which a just indignation hath carried me somewhat farther astray than I purposed, I say that the aforesaid Guglielmo was honored by all the gentlemen of Genoa and gladly seen of them, and having sojourned some days in the city and hearing many tales of Messer Ermino's avarice and sordidness, he desired to see him. Messer Ermino having already heard how worthy a man was this Guglielmo Borsiere, and having yet, all miser as he was, some tincture of gentle breeding, received him with very amicable words and blithe aspect, and entered with him into many and various discourses. Devising thus, he carried him, together with other Genoese who were in his company, into a fine new house of his which he had lately built, and after having shown it all to him, said, "Pray, Messer Guglielmo, you who have seen and heard many things, can you tell me of something that was never yet seen, which I may have depictured in the saloon of this my house?" Guglielmo, hearing this his preposterous question, answered, "Sir, I doubt me I cannot undertake to tell you of aught that was never yet seen, except it were sneezings or the like, but, an it like you, I will tell you of somewhat which methink you never yet beheld." Quoth Messer Ermino, not looking for such an answer as he got, "I pray you tell me what it is." Whereto Guglielmo promptly replied, "Cause liberality to be here depictured." When Messer Ermino heard this speech, there took him incontinence such a shame that it availed in a manner to change his disposition altogether to the contrary of that which it had been, and he said, "Messer Guglielmo, I will have it here depictured after such a fashion that neither you nor any other shall ever again have cause to tell me that I have never seen nor known it." And from that time forth, such was the virtue of Guglielmo's words, he was the most liberal and the most courteous gentleman of his day in Genoa, and he who most hospitably entreated both strangers and citizens. The ninth story. The King of Cyprus, touched to the quick by a Gascon lady, from a mean-spirited prince becometh a man of worth and valiance. The Queen's last commandment rested with Elisa, who, without awaiting it, began all blithely, young ladies, it hath often chanced that what all manner reproofs and many pains bestowed upon a man have not availed to bring about in him hath been effected by a word more often spoken at hazard than of purpose aforethought. This is very well shown in the story related by Loretta, and I, in my turn, purpose to prove to you the same thing by means of another and a very short one, for that, since good things may still serve, they should be received with a mind attent, whoever be the sayer thereof. I say, then, that in the days of the first king of Cyprus, after the conquest of the Holy Land by Godefroy de Bouillon, it chanced that a gentlewoman of Gascony went on a pilgrimage to the Holy Sepulchre and returning thence, came to Cyprus, where she was shamefully abused of certain lewd fellows, whereof having complained, without getting any satisfaction, she thought to appeal to the king for redress, but was told that she would lose her pains, for that he was of so abject a composition and so little of worth that, far from justifying others of their wrongs, he endured with shameful pusillanimity innumerable affronts offered to himself, insomuch that who's had any grudge against him was wont to vent his despite by doing him some shame or insult. The lady, hearing this and despairing of redress, bethought herself, by way of some small solacement of her chagrin, to seek to rebuke the king's pusillanimity, wherefore, presenting herself in tears before him, she said to him, My lord, I come not into thy presence for any redress that I expect of the wrong that hath been done me, but in satisfaction thereof, I prithee teach me how thou dost to suffer those affronts which I understand are offered unto thyself, so haply I may learn of thee, patiently to endure mine own, the which God knoweth, and I would gladly bestow on thee, since thou art so excellent a supporter thereof. The king, who till then had been sluggish and supine, awoke as if from sleep, and beginning with the wrong done to the lady, which he cruelly avenged, thenceforth became a very rigorous prosecutor of all who committed aught against the honor of his crown. The 10th story. Master Alberto of Bologna civilly putteth a lady to the blush who thought to have shamed him of being enamored of her. Elisa being now silent, the last burden of the story-telling rested with the queen, who, with womanly grace beginning to speak, said, Noble damsels, like as in the lucid nights the stars are the ornament of the sky, and as in springtime the flowers of the green meadows, even so are commendable manners and pleasing discourse adorned by witty sallies, which latter, for that they are brief, are yet more beseeming to women than to men, inasmuch as much and long speech, when as it may be dispensed with, is straitlier forbidden unto women than to men, albeit nowadays there are few or no women left who understand a sprightly saying, or, if they understand it, know how to answer it, to the general shame be it said of ourselves and of all women alive. For that virtue, which was erst in the minds of the women of times past, those of our day have diverted to the adornment of the body, and she on whose back are to be seen the most motley garments, and the most gaudily laced and garred and garnished with the greatest plenty of fringes and purflings and broidery, deemeth herself worthy to be held of far more account than her fellows, and to be honored above them, considering not that, were it a question of who should load her back and shoulders with bravery, an ass would carry much more thereof than any of them, nor would therefore be honored for more than an ass. I blush to avow it, for that I cannot say aught against other women, but I say it against myself. These women that are so laced and purfled and painted and party-colored abide either mute and senseless, like marble statues, or, and they be questioned, answer after such a fashion that it were far better to have kept silence. And they would have you believe that their enableness to converse among ladies and men of parts proceedeth from purity of mind, and to their witlessness they give the name of modesty, as if forsooth no woman were modest, But she who talketh with her chamberwoman or her laundress or her bakewench, the which had nature willed, as they would have it believed, she had assuredly limited unto them their prattle on other wise. It is true that in this, as in other things, it behoveth to have regard to time and place and with whom one talketh, for that it chanceth by times that women or men, thinking with some pleasantry or other to put another to the blush, and not having well measured their own powers with those of the latter, find that confusion, which they thought to cast upon another, recoil upon themselves. Wherefore, so you may know how to keep yourselves, and that, to boot, you may not serve as a text for the proverb which is current everywhere, to wit, that women in everything still take the worst, I would have you learn a lesson from the last of today's stories, which falleth to me to tell, to the intent that, even as you are by nobility of mind distinguished from other women, so likewise you may show yourselves no less removed from them by excellence of manners. It is not many years since there lived, and belike yet liveth, at Bologna a very great and famous physician, known by manifest renown to well nigh all the world. His name was Master Alberto, and such was the vivacity of his spirit that, albeit he was an old man of hard upon 70 years of age, and well nigh all natural heat had departed his body, he scrupled not to expose himself to the flames of love. For that, having seen at an entertainment a very beautiful widow lady, called, as some say, Madame Margherita de Ghissilieri, and being vastly taken with her, he received into his mature bosom, no otherwise than if he had been a young gallant. The amorous fire, insomuch that him seemed he rested not well by night, except the day foregone he had looked upon the delicate and lovesome countenance of the fair lady. Wherefore he fell to passing continually before her house, now afoot and now on horseback, as the occasion served him. Insomuch that she and many other ladies got wind of the cause of his constant passings to and fro, and oftentimes made merry among themselves to see a man thus ripe of years and wit in love, as if they deemed that that most pleasant passion of love took root and flourished only in the silly minds of the young and not otherwhere. But while he continued to pass back and forth, it chanced one holiday that, the lady being seated with many others before her door, and being Master Alberto making towards them from afar, they one and all took counsel together to entertain him, and do him honor, and after to rally him on that his passion. Accordingly, they all rose to receive him, and inviting him to enter, carried him into a shady courtyard, whither they let bring the choicest of wines and sweetmeats, and presently inquired of him, in very civil and pleasant terms, how it might be that he was fallen enamored of that fair lady, knowing her to be loved of many handsome, young and sprightly gentlemen. The physician, finding himself thus courteously attacked, put on a blithe countenance, and answered, Madam, that I love should be no marvel to any understanding person, and especially that I love yourself, for that you deserve it. And albeit old men are by operation of nature bereft of the vigor that behoveth unto amorous exercises, yet not for all that are they bereft of the will nor of the wit to apprehend that which is worthy to be loved. Nay, this latter is naturally the better valued of them, inasmuch as they have more knowledge and experience than the young. As for the hope that moveth me, who am an old man, to love you who are courted of many young gallants, it is on this wise. I have been many a time where I have seen ladies lunch and eat lupins and leeks. Now, although in the leek no part is good, yet is the head thereof less hurtful and more agreeable to the taste. But you ladies, moved by a perverse appetite, commonly hold the head in your hand and munch the leaves, which are not only not, but of an ill savour. How know I, madam, but you do the like in the election of your lovers? In which case, I should be the one chosen of you, and the others would be turned away. The gentlewoman and her companions were somewhat abashed and said, Doctor, you have right well and courteously chastised our presumptuous emprise. Algates, your love is dear to me, as should be that of a man of worth and learning. Wherefore, you may in all assurance command me, as your creature, of your every pleasure, saving only mine honor. The physician, rising with his companions, thanked the lady, and taking leave of her with laughter and merriment, departed thence. Thus the lady, looking not whom she rallied and thinking to discomfit another, was herself discomfited, wherefrom, and you be wise, you will diligently guard yourselves. The sun had begun to decline towards the evening, and the heat was in great part abated, when the stories of the young ladies and of the 3 young men came to an end, whereupon quoth the Queen blithesomely, "Henceforth, dear companions, there remaineth not more to do in the matter of my governance for the present day, save to give you a new queen, who shall, according to her judgment, order her life and ours, for that which is to come, unto honest pleasance. And albeit the day may be held to endure from now until nightfall, yet, for that whoso taketh not somewhat of time in advance cannot, meseemeth, so well provide for the future and in order that what the new queen shall deem needful for the morrow may be prepared. Methinketh the ensuing days should commence at this hour. Wherefore, in reverence of him unto whom all things live and for our own solacement, Philomena, a right discreet damsel, shall, as queen, govern our kingdom for the coming day." So saying, she rose to her feet, and putting off the laurel wreath, set it reverently on the head of Philomena, whom first herself, and after all the other ladies, and the young men likewise saluted as queen, cheerfully submitting themselves to her governance. Philomena blushed somewhat to find herself invested with the queendom, but calling to mind the words a little before spoken by Pampinea, in order that she might not appear witless, she resumed her assurance and in the first place confirmed all the offices given by Pampinea. Then, having declared that they should abide whereas they were, she appointed that which was to do against the ensuing morning, as well as for that night's supper. And after proceeded to speak thus: "Dearest companions, albeit Pampinea, more of her courtesy than for any worth of mine, hath made me queen of you all, I am not therefore disposed to follow my judgment alone in the manner of our living, but yours together with mine. And that you may know that which meseemeth is to do, and consequently at your pleasure add thereto or abate thereof, I purpose briefly to declare it to you. If I have well noted the course this day held by Pampinea, meseemeth I have found it alike praiseworthy and delectable, wherefore till such time as, for overlong continuance or other reason, it grow irksome to us, I judge it not to be changed. Order, then, being taken for the continuance of that which we have already begun to do, we will, arising hence, go a while a-pleasuring, and when as the sun shall be for going under, we will sup in the cool of the evening. And after sundry canzonets and other pastimes, we shall do well to betake ourselves to sleep. Tomorrow, rising in the cool of the morning, we will on like wise go somewhither a-pleasuring, as shall be most agreeable to every one, and as we have done today, we will at the due hour come back to eat, after which we will dance, and when we arise from sleep, as today we have done, we will return hither to our story-telling, wherein meseemeth of very great measure to consist alike of pleasance and of profit. Moreover, that which Pampinea had indeed no opportunity of doing, by reason of her late election to the governance, I purpose now to enter upon, to wit, to limit within some bound that whereof we are to tell and to declare it to you beforehand. So each of you may have leisure to think of some goodly story to relate upon the theme proposed, the which, an it please you, shall be on this wise, namely, seeing that since the beginning of the world men have been and will be, until the end thereof, bandied about by various shifts of fortune, each shall be holden to tell of those who, after being baffled by divers chances, have won at last to a joyful issue beyond their hope. Ladies and men alike all commended this ordinance and declared themselves ready to ensue it. Only Dioneo, the others all being silent, said, Madam, as all the rest have said, so say I, to wit that the ordinance given by you is exceeding pleasant and commendable, but of a special favor I crave you a boon, which I would have confirmed to me for such time as our company shall endure, to wit, that I may not be constrained by this your law to tell a story upon the given theme, and it like me not, but shall be free to tell that which shall most please me. And that none may think I seek this favor as one who hath not stories in hand, from this time forth I am content to be still the last to tell. The Queen, who knew him for a merry man and a gamesome, and was well assured that he asked this, but that he might cheer the company with some laughable story, when as they should be weary of discoursing, with the others' consent, cheerfully accorded him the favour he sought. Then, arising from session, with slow steps they took their way towards a rill of very clear water, that ran down from a little hill, amid great rocks and green herbage, into a valley overshaded with many trees, and there, going about in the water, bare-armed and shoeless, they fell to taking various diversions among themselves, till supper-time drew near, when they returned to the palace and there supped merrily. Supper ended, the queen called for instruments of music and bade Loretta lead up a dance, whilst Emilia sang a song, to the accompaniment of Dionio's lute. Accordingly, Loretta promptly set up a dance and led it off, whilst Emilia amorously warbled the following song. I burn for mine own charms with such a fire, methinketh that I ne'er of other love shall reck or have desire. Whene'er I mirror me, I see therein that good which still contenteth heart and sprite, nor fortune new nor thought of old can win, to dispossess me of such dear delight. What other object, then, could fill my sight? Enough of pleasance e'er to kindle in my breast a new desire? This good flees not, what time soe'er I'm fain afresh to view it for my solacement. Nay, at my pleasure, ever and again. With such a grace it doth itself present. Speech cannot tell it nor its full intent be known of mortal e'er, except indeed he burn with like desire. And I, grown more enamoured every hour, the straitlier fixed mine eyes upon it be, give all myself and yield me to its power, e'en tasting now of that it promised me, and greater joyance yet I hope to see, of such a strain as ne'er was proven here below of love desire. Loretta having thus made an end of her ballad, in the burden of which all had blithely joined, albeit the words thereof gave some much matter for thought, divers other rounds were danced, and a part of the short night being now spent, it pleased the queen to give an end to the first day, wherefore, letting kindle the flambeaux, she commanded that all should betake themselves to rest until the ensuing morning, and all, accordingly, returning to their several chambers, did so. Here endeth the first day of the Decameron. If you enjoyed listening, please subscribe to the channel by hitting the subscribe button below. After doing so, click the bell icon to receive new content notifications.